Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
Sasuke never knocked, really. Not before entering a patient's room, not when entering an unfamiliar home, not when entering a stranger's office. She especially didn't knock before entering the archives, knowing Naruto and Shikamaru were studying there. After all, they studied there almost every day. Kakashi, the current 6th, was determined to quickly train the future 7th in administrative matters, and therefore assigned Nara as her mentor, apparently hoping the girl would imbibe at least some of the latter's order and logic. Sasuke didn't knock, in fact, not because she was ill-mannered or didn't care about those she visited, but rather because she didn't feel the need to announce her arrival. The Uchiha honestly didn't want to catch anyone out. Moreover, she herself hadn't expected any trickery. But the sight of Nara leaning over Uzumaki, seated in a chair at the table, and kissing his friend, in a decidedly unambiguous manner, surprised even her for a few hundredths of a second. However, exactly after those hundredths of a second, Shikamaru raised his head, straightening up, and in his unfailingly phlegmatic manner, though with a noticeable hint of annoyance, said, "Well, at least you could have knocked." The remark was generally sound, but refusing such a circus, Shikamaru taking the initiative and Naruto clearly aghast at it, would have been akin to a mortal sin. So Sasuke ignored his remark. "It's been half an hour since lunch," she said evenly, as if she'd just seen nothing, looking at Uzumaki, who was frozen in place, her gaze fixed on a single point. "I had no idea you were still here." The last of the clan glanced at Nara, whose face still bore a hint of disappointment, and added, "By the way, Kakashi was looking for you," she thought, adding, "about half an hour ago." A hint of doubt crossed the boy's face, but he had no compelling reason to distrust Sasuke's words. After the war, the leading contender for the post of head of the analysis department had often disappeared into the Hokage's office, and it wasn't surprising that the 6th was looking for Shikamaru, even if it was just a small lie on the Uchiha's part. Nara looked at Naruto, who hadn't moved a single moment since Sasuke appeared in the archives. "You better leave now," Uchiha offered free advice. "I'll handle it." Shikamaru sighed, not without regret, but hurried out of the room. After letting the boy out and closing the door behind him, the Snake Sanin's protege walked over to the desk and sat down on its edge, right on top of the spread-out papers. "He's already gone. You can stop pretending." Yes, perhaps she felt a twinge of jealousy, seeing someone even slightly encroaching on her privileged status and place in Naruto's mind and heart, especially someone of the opposite sex. Yes, she was selfish, and there was nothing she could do about it. And Uzumaki still didn't move. "Are you just going to sit here until evening?" Sasuke asked. There was no reaction. "It seems a heavier weapon should have been used. How about 2 servings of hot ramen at your favorite Ichiraku?" It wasn't like she was a fan of noodles, but Uzumaki still showed no signs of intelligent life. "Then I'll just get up and leave." Sasuke tried to punch her in the gut, knowing full well her friend had a thing for bringing back the Uchiha as they faded into the sunset, but Naruto didn't even blink. "Then I'll just call Kakashi so he can see what you're doing here." This was blurted out more out of petty vindictiveness, because Sasuke was already starting to get annoyed that no one was reacting to her, and she was almost standing up when her friend suddenly grabbed the hem of her shirt and finally perked up. "Don't invite him." Naruto suddenly looked at the Uchiha with an almost frightened expression, but then her features softened, and she spoke with trembling lips. "Did you see everything?" Sasuke nodded, looking down at her friend. Right now, she could bet any amount of money and or her organ that Shikamaru had just stolen the Uzumaki's first intergender kiss. "Why would he do that? He's just a good friend. Why would he?" Her blue eyes filled with a truly naive incomprehension. "I wonder how many times Nara has tried to hint to her, both subtly and not so subtly," Uchiha thought, trying to remember if she'd seen the two of them outside the archives before, perhaps at a cafe, or a park, or wherever else a guy might ask a girl to suggest a date. The funny thing was, she had no doubt Shikamaru was serious about it. "Because you are of different genders," Uchiha said sarcastically, still inwardly extremely pleased that Naruto couldn't even pronounce the word. "Kissed. But I... Sasuke's eyebrows rose involuntarily as his friend raised her palms to her lips in a girlish gesture, as if trying to hide them. The Uchiha hadn't even realized the future Hokage could be so girlish. "I didn't mean to do that. He's my friend. And apparently he's no longer happy with this situation." The Snake Sanin's protege snapped, even allowing herself to enjoy the sight of his blue eyes widening even further. But dealing with sudden girl problems wasn't really in her best interests. "Anyway, just ask Kakashi to change your mentor. Or let him teach you himself. What's the problem?" Naruto hiccuped and shook her head. "That way you'll have less contact with Shikamaru, and maybe he'll finally realize he has no chance and leave you alone," Sasuke continued. "He's not a stupid guy, after all. If anything happens, tell Kakashi, he'll help him out." "No need, Kakashi-sensei," Uzumaki muttered under her breath. "Well, Kakashi is the only one who can find the right words for the Nara," the Uchiha countered. "And he can also teach you how to deal with men in these situations, because you seem... I don't want Kakashi-sensei to teach me any situations." Naruto suddenly blurted out and instantly blushed to her ears. Sasuke nearly choked on the words that caught in her throat. For a few seconds, the archives fell into a deathly silence. "Just don't tell me that you..." Uchiha couldn't even finish, still not believing that her guess was correct. But from the way Naruto involuntarily raised her hands to her chest, as if she wanted to protect something, and from her general look of awareness that she had said too much, Sasuke understood that the best was yet to come. Naruto hadn't really thought about why she liked Kakashi-sensei. Whether it was an Oedipus complex projecting her father's image onto his student, the result of Hitaki's general masculine attractiveness, the aftermath of puberty, simply a first crush, or all of the above. At some point Uzumaki began to notice strange things about herself. She felt stifled in his presence, hearing and then immediately forgetting what he said, realizing she couldn't look him in the eye, as she always had, even when he first became their mentor. When the Force daughter finally grasped the truth of what was happening, Naruto was even terrified. Deep down, Uzumaki believed that everything was destined for her just like her parents. One day, she would meet that one person and be with them to the end, no matter what, moving mountains, traversing hundreds of miles and hundreds of obstacles, defeating all enemies. And this image didn't suit Hitaki Kakashi at all. He was significantly older than her, was addicted to pornographic novels by the Toad Sannin, was constantly late, drawled, didn't comb his hair, and probably hadn't shaved in weeks, hence the mask he wore. And yet, he was still as unimaginably attractive as a girl's first love. So, realizing all this, Naruto acted like a true girl. She began avoiding meetings with her sensei. Fortunately, Kakashi had just in time assigned her Shikamaru as her teacher, a great guy and a wonderful friend, as Uzumaki had always considered. The future Hokage would have followed him through thick and thin without a second thought. She enjoyed spending time with him, admired his intelligence, and felt completely at ease with him, remembering well how he was the only one unsurprised when, at their academy graduation, it was suddenly revealed that the short-haired, bullying Naruto and the silent Sasuke weren't actually boys at all, a revelation that had stunned even some of the teachers. But Shikamaru couldn't be that one. Uzumaki couldn't explain it logically. She simply felt it wasn't him, and so she was doubly offended when the boy made his feelings so clear. Jiraiya had once managed to convey to her that if a guy their age kissed a girl, it was unlikely they would back down, and if they didn't want misunderstandings, it was better to nip things in the bud. But nipping things in the bud meant losing a friend, and she didn't want that, or Shikamaru taking any more initiative. So she was immensely grateful to Sasuke for showing up at the archives so opportunely, especially with the Hokage's summons. But when Uchiha mentioned Kakashi, and even began to elaborate on the topic, completely upsetting Naruto after Shikamaru's actions. Her gratitude gave way to panic. What would Sasuke say when he realized exactly how Uzumaki felt for their sensei? Uchiha was like a sister to Naruto, perhaps even closer, like a reflection in a mirror or the reversed half of a playing card. But even from her, the girl preferred to hide feelings she was almost ashamed of. And that was no easy task, given the depth of her connection with Sasuke. And now Uchiha had understood everything with a half hint, practically by intuition alone, and now she looked at her with disbelieving eyes. So Naruto awaited the verdict in fear. Shikamaru, of course, doesn't. Sasuke lowered her voice for some reason. No, Naruto answered just as quietly. And Kakashi? I hope not. And Kakashi about Shikamaru? And where from? Well, you're our master at not noticing what's happening right in front of your nose. The conversation, bordering on a whisper, didn't stop Uchiha from raising his eyes to the ceiling for a second. Naruto hissed and pinched her friend on the thigh. Maybe he saw how Shikamaru treats you and decided to help the guy, Sasuke continued. Or Shikamaru could have even asked himself. This time, the Uchiha earned a slap on the leg, after which Naruto quickly buried her face in her hands and shook her head. She didn't even want to think about what Kakashi-sensei might have already noticed, and how he might already be helping Shikamaru. Could it really be considered that he discovered her? Or was this all just a ridiculous coincidence? And how should she even act now? With Shikamaru? With Itachi? To the ramen shop? Sasuke asked, as if in answer to her thoughts. Naruto slowly lifted her head from her palms, looked firmly at her friend, and nodded. As if confirming her resolve, her stomach growled hungrily. Oh, these administrative matters, Uzumaki said in her most casual tone, as if nothing had happened, rising from her chair and stretching. You'll even forget about food. Sasuke remained silent. She had already exceeded her daily word limit. But even after such a typical complaint, the fourth's daughter fell silent and only spoke again when they left the archives. Do you think Shikamaru will be surprised if I don't show up after lunch? She asked, her voice tinged with either regret or doubt. I doubt it, Sasuke replied. She even allowed herself a jab. And what are you planning to do after lunch? Lock yourself in the house like a princess in a dungeon? Actually, I was thinking of training with you, Uzumaki muttered, throwing her hands behind her head and ignoring the barbs. They hadn't agreed on training, but they also didn't need an explanation as to why such a need had suddenly arisen. What if I have plans? Although no explanation was required, that didn't mean the Uchiha would agree so easily. It wasn't often that the choice arose between friendly support and a free circus. Do you have any plans? Naruto asked, genuinely surprised, looking at her friend. Not exactly, Sasuke drawled, wondering how else to spin the situation. More like, there's one thing. The Snake Sannin's protege suddenly faltered, spotting someone she really didn't want to bump into in the hallway ahead. Uzumaki raised her eyebrows in confusion, apparently thinking she hadn't heard something. Keep going and don't stop, Uchiha said, barely moving her lips, hoping that the storm would pass by. But Naruto, of course, couldn't simply listen to her. The future Hokage innocently turned her head forward, in the direction of their movement, and saw Ino walking toward them, her gaze already fixed on Sasuke. To the Uchiha's great regret, the corridor leading to the expected intersection of their routes had no branches, let alone office doors, though Sasuke would have ducked out the window without a second thought. He could only hope that with Naruto, Yamanaka wouldn't be. Hello, Ino-chan, Uzumaki greeted, apparently intending to move on, but the heiress of the Censor clan had already stopped, stopping right in front of the Uchiha, so Naruto involuntarily slowed down as well. Deep inside, the Snake Sannin's protege allowed herself a suppressed sigh. Hello, Yamanaka replied melodically, as if for everyone, but she still kept her gaze fixed on Sasuke. Sasuke was intrigued by the area where the wall and ceiling met. Back from lunch? No, we're just going to him, Naruto said, slightly drawing out her words, shifting her puzzled gaze from Ino to Sasuke. No wonder you and Shikamaru weren't visible. The girl cast a short, sly glance at Uzumaki, and the fourth's daughter involuntarily hiccuped and covered her lips with her fingertips. This didn't escape the Uchiha's peripheral vision. Of course, Nara was unlikely to have spilled the beans to his childhood friend, but Yamanaka was clearly aware of his intentions regarding Naruto. The subtle hint he dropped would have been perfectly harmless, if not for the fact that fate hadn't caught Sasuke there today, who had never been particularly sensible. Irritation at those meddling in other people's business flared in her chest like an oiled fuse, and Ino had already turned back to her. Sasuke, I suggested we train not long ago, remember? Yes, she responded to Yamanaka with a direct look, obeying her emotions, but almost immediately regretted her haste. The sensor's charm parameter was clearly set to maximum. Does that mean you agree? The girl blinked innocently, running her slender fingers through the blonde strand of hair near her face. It means I remember. Uchiha vowed to herself to be more restrained, feeling like she was treading on a minefield. If only she'd ever stand up for anyone again. And what do you think about today? Ino continued asking questions, smiling almost predatorily. Sorry, I'm training with Naruto today. Uzumaki Sasuke suddenly clearly defined her recent proposal. But you said you had plans. The future Hokage woke up at the wrong time. Uchiha wanted to give his friend a suggestive slap. You are my entire plan for today, the last of the clan muttered, turning her head and looking Naruto straight in the eyes, and once again swore to herself to keep her mouth shut. Ino's eyebrows seemed to twitch upward. I hope you're training on a different program, she remarked, but her voice suddenly lost its usual melodic playfulness. Then I won't disturb you. She finally stopped glaring at Sasuke and, adjusting the folders of documents she was holding, walked between her friends, clearing the way for them. Uchiha, appreciating Ino's last gesture, was already hoping that this meant the end of her suffering, but at that very moment, the censor turned around and said in a completely new tone, My offer still stands. A brief jolt of electricity ran down Sasuke's spine, and the last of the clan barely managed to save her face. Uzumaki stood next to him, watching Yamanaka's wake with a bewildered expression. At this moment, in this particular part of the universe, the Uchiha could only hope her friend hadn't noticed. Yeah, didn't notice. At a certain point, Naruto had become quite adept at recognizing women's signs of attention, whether consciously or not. But Sasuke had already promised to train with her, meaning Uzumaki had plenty of time, so she was in no hurry. They reached the ramen shop, ordered, talked, and only when Uchiha finally relaxed again and Naruto emptied half the bowl, the future Hokage casually asked, How long has Ino been hitting on you? Sasuke's fingers twitched so hard she almost dropped her chopsticks. I can't keep it all under my nose, Uzumaki said, breaking into a truly fox-like smile. Now tell me the truth. The Uchiha sighed a little more loudly than usual and put down her chopsticks, clearly realizing that Naruto wouldn't let her finish eating until he heard everything he wanted. According to her, it all started when she noticed she was running into Ino more often. Yamanaka worked at headquarters, and Sasuke still visited regularly after the war as a consultant on certain renegade matters, but even so, they were meeting in the same building far too often. Ino even invited her to lunch a few times, but the Snake Sanin's protege always excused herself by saying she was dining with Uzumaki. After that, she began to invite the Uchiha to a few words whenever they met, choosing words that Sasuke was forced to keep the conversation at least at the level of stock phrases. Even then, the latter of the clan would have suspected something was wrong, but until a certain point, she sincerely believed the censor was simply trying to establish camaraderie with her. Moreover, Yamanaka spoke to everyone with a slightly flirtatious and coy manner, which Uchiha now used as a special excuse. That precise moment had come a week ago, when Ino had suggested they train together sometime, to which the Uchiha had almost immediately declined. She hadn't meant to disparage Yamanaka's skills. She simply didn't believe she would gain any new experience, and therefore saw no point in such training. And when the censor asked, "Why?" Sasuke had answered honestly and directly. However, hearing the reference to ineffectiveness and futility didn't even surprise Ino, who had meant a different kind of training, and that there was still a way they could learn something new together. Yamanaka had also been looking Sasuke in the eye so directly that any misinterpretation of her words was simply impossible. Then, acutely sensing the Uchiha's inability to articulate anything coherent at that moment, the censor said she wasn't rushing her answer and had already taken 5 steps away before Sasuke could manage to utter something like, "I don't think that's a good idea." However, her tone was apparently so unconvincing that Ino easily finished off Orochimaru's protege with the phrase, "You can't know until you try." That's what she said. Naruto listened to her friend with her mouth open, completely forgetting about her uneaten noodles. Yes, and then she turned around and just left. Even from Sasuke's impassive face, it was clear that she was not happy with the situation itself, nor with the fact that she had to talk about it. But Uzumaki's curiosity was still not satisfied. "Why don't you just tell her no?" the future Hokage asked. "I told her the very next time we met. I even found it myself specifically. Ino told me not to make any hasty decisions and strongly recommended I think about it." The Uchiha even grimaced slightly, as if she had a toothache, and suddenly switched from defense to offense. "But I, unlike you, can hope that everything will resolve itself. Kissing Shikamaru isn't exactly an ambiguous proposition." "That's true." Naruto succumbed to the change of topic. "You know, while I was listening to you, I realized I need to talk to Shikamaru directly. Tell him I can't date him because he's my friend." Uzumaki picked at her cold noodles with her chopsticks. It wasn't the future Hokage's style to delay decisions, especially those involving those close to her, but this decision promised to be unpleasant, Naruto knew. Perhaps she should go on a mission to give Shikamaru some time. "The main thing is, don't mix up the points." Sasuke gave rather veiled advice, beginning to be even more sarcastic than usual due to the general dissatisfaction. "But you should also have a normal talk with Ino," Naruto noted, staying on his own wavelength. Uchiha grimaced again. It seemed like she was starting to develop a certain reflex. "If you don't want this kind of training, then tell her directly," Uzumaki continued to insist. "Are we going to train ourselves?" Sasuke nodded suggestively at her friend's bowl, changing the subject. "Let's go, of course," answered the forced daughter. Naruto returned to her ramen, and the Uchiha was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. Only metaphorically, but still. It's not that she was a confirmed heterosexual and condemned accepted and so-called deviations from the norm. It wasn't just Orochimaru's training that was to blame. The shinobi life itself, which they had all been taught from infancy, couldn't be considered correct by any standards. This wasn't advertised, but as long as Chunin, and especially Jounin, didn't violate the rules, their personal preferences and quirks, from the uniform color of their furniture in their home and office to their sexual partners, were largely overlooked. The main thing was not to shout about it from the rooftops. That's why Ino's proposal didn't seem out of the ordinary. Perhaps the heir to the censor clan wanted to try something new, expand her range of interests. Sasuke preferred not to think about it, because she had no intention of getting involved in any of this. But if Kakashi suddenly showed interest in Naruto, given the latter's current state of mind, that would be something the Uchiha would watch with interest. Incidentally, it would be a good idea to observe her former sensei at her leisure. Returning to Yamanaka, Sasuke didn't think it was a good idea to invite her for a private conversation. At best, Ino would again ask her to think about it. At worst, she'd jump straight to action. So the Uchiha preferred to simply avoid the censor's notice. Sooner or later, she'd either figure it out or move on to something new, and Sasuke simply needed to wait out this siege. The next morning, Naruto stood in front of the archive's door, convincing herself that she was determined to enter. Uzumaki was certain Shikamaru was already there, as she was 15 minutes late for their daily class, 7 of which she spent holding the archives, sighing and beginning to get angry. Why was she, the future Hokage, so nervous about talking to her friend? She knew Nara was smart and should understand her. And she knew that if she didn't resolve the issue now, it would only get worse. She'd spoken to so many different people, so different from herself, and had gotten her point across quite well, but why was everything so complicated now, after all? Truly, she'd rather fight Kage again than open that door now. Making some inarticulate sound and mentally giving herself a good kick, Naruto yanked the handle and took a step forward. And Shikamaru, of course, was already in the archives. Hello. The guy was standing by the shelf, looking through some scroll, and looked up when the door opened. Hello. Okay, let's move on. I thought you weren't coming today. Just like yesterday, Shikamaru said as Uzumaki took a deep breath. I had those thoughts, yes, Naruto admitted, immediately deflating back. But I think we need to talk about yesterday. What happened? I think I should apologize, Nara interrupted, closing the scroll and placing it back on the shelf. I don't know what made me do that yesterday. Or rather, I know, I really like you. He seemed to stumble over his own confession. I really like you too, blurted out the forced daughter, and quickly added, that is to say, as a friend, I understand. Shikamaru chimed in. That's probably why I wanted to cross that line yesterday. Sorry for scaring you. He looked at Naruto, and she wanted to pat him on the shoulder and tell him it was okay. She'd been through worse than that. But she still managed to remind herself that the question was still open. If you feel uncomfortable in my presence, she began again, we can stop classes for a while. No, that's not necessary, Nara replied immediately. You need to prepare for your new position, and I wouldn't want you to delay your dream because of me. These words deeply touched Uzumaki. Shikamaru looked away. You know, some people say that I became very unsociable after the war. Probably because of my father's death, Naruto thought regretfully. Yes, I've become more irritable, more withdrawn, more calculating. Many may not like this. I think I'm confused, and that's why I reached out to you. He even turned away slightly, so the light wouldn't fall on his face. Naruto was instantly overcome with sympathy. Her friend was going through a tough time. How could she think about herself in such a situation? Sorry, I didn't know. She approached Nara and touched his shoulder. I'm always at your service, and would be glad if you stayed to help me. Thank you. Your words are very important to me, Nara said, and suddenly changed the subject. I've been meaning to ask, are you doing anything before our classes? No, usually not. The future Hokage didn't even have time to be surprised. Then maybe I should come pick you up sometime? Shikamaru asked casually. A shadow of doubt crept into Naruto's thoughts. She had no reason to refuse, but why did she feel like she hadn't achieved the goal of the conversation? Okay, the boy paused briefly. Shall we continue where we left off yesterday? He pushed back the chair Uzumaki usually sat in. The fourth daughter hiccuped and hid her lips behind her fingertips. No, I'm in administrative judicial proceedings. Nara smiled. He's fooled me like a kitten, was Sasuke's first thought when his friend told her about her morning conversation with Shikamaru. No, Uchiha guessed Nara wouldn't have gone anywhere without a well-thought-out plan, but to play on Uzumaki's character so perfectly. The Snake Sannin's protege couldn't even decide whether she was still admiring him or simply indignant at someone stealing Naruto's attention, which should have been hers. Though, most of all, she was certainly amused. It was evening, and they were sitting in a tea house with a common room, where the future Hokage was pretending to be half-corpse, her entire body lying across a low table and sympathizing alternately with herself and Shikamaru. And he acted all day as if nothing had happened. I mean, I'm glad he acted that way, because I wouldn't want to give him false hope. What false hopes? Sasuke commented to herself. Shikamaru sees the goal and goes for it. He probably really did become more withdrawn, more cunning, it would be more correct to say, "He even reminded me of you in some way." Did you really notice? Uchiha couldn't resist the irony. On the one hand, of course, I want to help him, but on the other, he will help himself very well, and will even harness you. On the other hand, are his feelings genuine? It's just compensation, isn't it? The last of the clan was already starting to get tired of this game, but Naruto suddenly stopped her mental torment. That's it. I don't want to think about it anymore. She straightened up, finally letting her chin rest on the tabletop, and spun around in place. When will they bring our order? If she could, Sasuke would even sigh with relief, but for some reason she began to sigh too often. And how are you? Did you talk to Ino? Ah, no, it would be better if Naruto continued to suffer about her own. Yes, Uchiha lied without raising an eyebrow. In fact, to her surprise, she hadn't seen Yamanaka at headquarters today. Or perhaps she simply hadn't been looking for a meeting, and Sasuke certainly wasn't going to push it. And what about her? Uzumaki even gave up trying to spot the waitress for a second. I was, to put it mildly, not happy. Therefore, I think it's best for me not to cross paths with her for a while. The Uchiha answered the fourth's daughter with a direct gaze, and was ready to pray to any god if only Naruto wouldn't suddenly show insight. Well, yes, it's not easy to accept refusals. Uzumaki drooped. That's exactly why you couldn't properly turn Shikamaru down. The last of the clan relaxed, allowing herself a hint of sarcasm towards her friend. Oh, Naruto, Sasuke, hello. A familiar Uchiha voice sounded above them. Hello, Sakura-chan. Uzumaki immediately beamed. Hello, Saya. She waved. Come sit with us. The girl moved from the middle of her side of the table, making room next to him. Thank you for the invitation. Saya said the etiquette phrase, sitting down next to the future Hokage. To Sasuke's abstract regret, she too had to move over to make room for Sakura. The medic sat carefully next to her, her hands folded in her lap. The Uchiha had become accustomed to Naruto's behavior. Ever since the end of the war, Sakura had become extremely cautious and reserved in Sasuke's presence. This suited the Uchiha just fine. She hoped the girl had finally begun to outgrow her painful attachment to her. As for Orochimaru's protege, she had certainly appreciated Haruno's growth during the final battle and had even finally accepted her into her circle, but as a younger sister, someone she was willing to protect, but couldn't fully trust, primarily to protect and safeguard. Moreover, for now, she was forced to remain as cold as ever in order to help Sakura release old feelings. But Sasuke sincerely wanted the best for her. Uzumaki continued to be very active. Now we'll find a waitress and order more for you. Wait! Haruno stopped her. We were at Kakashi-sensei's. He asked you to come see him. The Uchiha glanced quickly at the fourth's daughter, but she didn't give herself away with a single casual gesture, except for keeping her head turned slightly longer so that Saya and Sakura couldn't see her face. This could easily be attributed to the fact that she was still looking for the waitress. It's already evening. The last of the clan showed a sudden burst of nobility, giving her friend a path to retreat. I think this can wait until tomorrow. No, Sasuke. Uzumaki interrupted her, already getting up from her seat. That's also the Hokage's job, to be where you're expected. Their eyes met for a second, and Uchiha understood how the fourth's daughter had managed to hide her feelings for so long, even from her. For Naruto, duty always came first. Cancel my order, smiled the fourth's daughter. I'm going. I'll see you later. And she quickly moved between the people toward the exit. I'll go find a waitress. Saya also stood up from her seat. What should I order, Sakura? Linden tea, please. The medic smiled, clasping her fingers together on the tabletop. The girl nodded and walked away, maneuvering among the visitors with the fluidity of a true shinobi. Haruno fidgeted slightly. Sasuke didn't move, perfectly able to abstract herself from external stimuli. About a minute passed in silence. How's your day? The medic was the first to break down. Not bad, Uchiha replied. Anything new at headquarters? Nothing since your absence after lunch. And what about your hand? Fine. That was apparently the end of Haruno's questions, because the medic always inquired about Sasuke's arm, regrown from the first cells, last of all, probably out of professional habit. However, the Uchiha could tell from the girl's appearance and voice, from the most subtle signs, that she was worried about something, and she was even about to ask what had happened, but she didn't have the chance. You know, I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, Sakura began. Orochimaru's protege didn't stop her, which could already be regarded as encouragement to continue. As you can imagine, our relationship has always been complicated. Haruno decided to come clean? Well, that hadn't happened since the war, and perhaps it was time. I chased after you a lot when we were kids. I was annoying, probably irritating you terribly. Even after you left, during our rare encounters, I acted like a complete idiot. Sakura awkwardly tucked a strand of pink hair behind her ear, as if trying to fill the pauses between sentences with action. After the victory, I decided that enough was enough. It was time to start a new life. I even went on a couple of dates. Sasuke had heard about this, and thought the medic probably wanted her advice. Surprisingly, the Uchiha was even willing to help if she could. For example, burying the body of her negligent suitor in the nearby woods. But for some reason, nothing worked out, and I never went past the third date with anyone. Haruno looked timidly at Sasuke. And then I thought, what if this isn't my thing? There has to be a reason why I can't get along with guys. The Uchiha looked calmly into Sakura's eyes, and the girl returned her cautious gaze. What if I've always been drawn to you because Haruno hesitated, unable to say what she wanted. Lesbian? Sasuke added logically. For her, there were no taboo topics or words. Sakura blushed and nodded. And? Uchiha pushed her further. She decided against asking. And what does this have to do with me? Lest it sound too rude and alienate her former teammate. And Haruno took a deep breath, gathering her courage, and exhaled. I think we should try dating. It was as if Sasuke had been run over by a cart in an instant, right in the middle of the tea house. What? Uchiha even asked, even though that wasn't the word that was on the tip of her tongue. Dating? Sakura repeated with the most innocent look. Orochimaru's protege thought that when Naruto left, he had probably accidentally taken the logic of everything that had happened with him. I'm sorry. Haruno suddenly came to her senses. I shouldn't have started from that. She turned her whole body towards Sasuke and said, clearly rehearsed, I like you. But this was like a bag of sand on the head, lighter, but right on the crown. I understand this is all unexpected for you, Sakura continued quickly, seeing the Uchiha's cheekbones harden. But it's also unexpected for me, even though right now I feel like I've been working toward this my whole life. Sasuke tried to figure out how quickly she was forming the seals for the movement jutsu. So if you... Tea will be ready in a couple of minutes. Saya suddenly appeared quietly, and the Uchiha nearly jumped up. Sakura, however, turned sharply back to the table, as if she'd just been caught doing something inappropriate. This had to be taken advantage of. I think I'll go. I forgot to tell Naruto something. Sasuke quickly began to get up. Haruno perked up. No, she couldn't let her stop her. But your order's about to arrive. Saya raised her eyebrows slightly in surprise, as if she'd changed her mask. Besides, Sakura seemed to be saying something to you. We're already done, Uchiha replied immediately. Pay for me. I owe you. She looked warningly into the girl's expressionless eyes for a few seconds. Okay. The former root member accepted her terms and turned to Haruno, who was unsure what to say or do. I also ordered some linden tea. I figured you couldn't choose a bad one. Could you tell me why? Sakura hesitated, but her natural politeness forced her to answer, and she couldn't stop the Uchiha from leaving the tea house with increasing speed. Once outside, Sasuke was able to catch her breath. It would be nice if everything that had just happened was just a genjutsu. The Uchiha had even cast a dispelling seal, but nothing had changed. So Haruno Sakura, her sweet little sister, had really just confessed to her. The main thing Sasuke knew was that Uzumaki didn't find out about this confession. Otherwise, the Uchiha line would be extinguished without any hope of recovery. At the thought of the future Hokage, Sasuke felt an unpleasant pang of intuition. For the second time that day, Naruto found herself in front of a door that she really didn't want to open. After realizing her feelings, Uzumaki tried to see her former sensei only when absolutely necessary, and only in the presence of others. The fact that he had just summoned her himself certainly qualified as extreme necessity, but she couldn't count on anyone else's presence right now. Office hours were long over, the workday was over, and the invisible but omnipresent A and B were certainly no help. So the fourth daughter had no choice but to open the door with roughly the same feeling she had when she first removed the seal from Kurama's mental cage. "Did you call Kakashi-sensei?" Nevertheless, she managed to portray carefree behavior quite believably. For now. "Yes, Naruto, come in," the sixth replied. Hatake sat at the table, his back to the window, his elbow resting on the arm of the chair and the same hand propping up his cheekbone, examining a scroll lying open on the table before him. Behind him, the panoramic window revealed the Hokage rock glowing in the sunset. A magnificent view, both outside and in front of him. Uzumaki sighed and tried to collect her scattered thoughts. "Don't just stand there, come here," Kakashi called to her, still not looking at her, to Naruto's relief. "I want to show you something." Well, no, she won't walk into this trap voluntarily. The future Hokage strode up to the desk and leaned over it, peering at the scroll. The ends of her blonde ponytail fell onto the parchment, obscuring some of the hieroglyphs. Go around this side, please." Hatake finally raised his eyes, and their gazes met for a second. Naruto frowned and muttered something under her breath, but still walked around the table and stopped a meter from the Hokage's chair. Kakashi sank into thought again, his eyes fixed on the scroll, but Uzumaki was unable to read its contents, which was clearly what the sixth wanted her to do. The message wasn't encrypted, all the characters were familiar, the words simply wouldn't form sentences. The fourth's daughter even guessed whose presence was causing this. "What do you think?" asked the copyist 2 minutes later, unaware that his former student, in order to distract herself, was inventing little people from hieroglyphs and making them fight each other. "You're the Hokage, you decide," Naruto said, coming to her senses, and was about to disappear with a clear conscience. However, Kakashi, judging by everything, wasn't satisfied with that answer. "And what will you answer when you become Hokage yourself?" he asked with a hint of ironic interest. Uzumaki puffed out her cheeks and pretended to be lost in thought. The main thing was not to look sensei in the eyes. And thankfully, the rest of her face was hidden under her mask. "Okay, let's even create all the conditions," said Sixth and stood up from his chair. "Sit down." This was said in such a voice that Naruto only sat down because her knees seemed to buckle. Hatake had already turned his chair around to face the table. Realizing she couldn't get out of this so easily, Uzumaki sighed and was forced to resort to the mind-clearing techniques she'd been taught at Mezokuban. Then she waited about 10 seconds and tried to read the writing again. It worked. So much so that Naruto didn't even notice how, with one palm on the tabletop and the other on the back of the chair, Kakashi leaned forward, simultaneously toward her and the scroll. "It seems that both villages' claims to the fields damaged by the war are justified, but in that case," the girl began, finally grasping the problem. Suddenly, turning her head, she realized that her and Sensei's faces were not only level, but not even a single palm's length apart. It seemed she had seen something similar yesterday, when Shikamaru. All thoughts immediately flew out of my head. "You really should make your own decision." The fourth's daughter, nearly knocking over her chair, jumped up and flew a couple of steps away from Hatake, covering her lips with the tips of her cupped hands. Whether this was a belated gesture of self-control or a gesture of protecting her lips, Uzumaki didn't have time to consider. Naruto, is something wrong? Kakashi asked the obvious, still giving his former student a chance to explain herself. No, she answered too quickly and tried to level the situation by adding, not at all. You haven't checked in a while, Itachi said, straightening up. After a short pause, he began to walk around the chair, approaching his teacher's daughter. It took all her strength not to back away, keeping her distance. How are your studies with Shikamaru? Oh great, huh? Did she just stutter? We were just looking into a similar case the other day, and frankly, I'm a little confused about it all, so I don't want to interfere with your important decision. Six stopped right next to her, and Naruto, having averted her eyes by the end of her justification speech, nevertheless took a step back. Damn it! Do you like your classes? What did he mean by that question? Maybe Nara really was asking him for something? Yes, Shikamaru is a very good teacher. Uzumaki managed to answer with neutral honesty, silently praying only for Kakashi to quickly give her an escape hatch. I still don't like this very much, the copy ninja said slowly, and his words sent a chill down the fourth daughter's spine. Understand, Naruto, I'm worried about you. How can we even resist him? Is there any point? We both understand that I am only in this place to prepare it for you. He is like a close relative for whom she has forbidden feelings. I just want you to be happy first and foremost. Kakashi's palms landed on the girl's shoulders, squeezing them lightly, and only that allowed Uzumaki to stay on her feet. She involuntarily raised her head and forgot how to breathe. I understand, thank you, the future Hokage whispered, feeling herself literally falling into the well of dark eyes, one of which was crossed by an old thin scar. Too close. She's too close to him. Naruto. Sasuke, frozen for a second in the doorway of the Hokage's office, had the strong feeling that she had just prevented the Fifth World War. On the one hand, it was all utterly harmless. What was so special about a teacher's hands on a student's shoulders? But on the other hand, even with her appendix removed, Uchiha felt her friend needed saving. Besides, after Haruno's confession and the dash across the rooftops, she wasn't exactly in the mood for amusement. Sorry, Kakashi, I don't have time to explain. I urgently need Naruto's help. Sasuke was next to sixth and almost seventh in the blink of an eye, grabbing the latter's hand, preparing to tear her out of the trap she had fallen into by force, but Itachi himself, probably taken aback, removed his hands. Without wasting her chakra, the snake Sanin's protege folded her middle and index fingers and, along with Uzumaki, teleported to the other end of the Hokage tower. Naruto, limply allowing her wrist to be gripped too tightly, immediately sank against the wall behind her and let out a ragged breath, as if she'd just been holding it for a long time. Are you okay? Sasuke asked, checking the severity of the situation, prepared to use any means necessary to revive her friend. The fourth daughter shook her head honestly, still trying to catch her breath. What happened? He wanted me to look at the scroll that was sent to him. Naruto's voice was catastrophically colorless, his eyes staring somewhere in front of him. He sat me down in a chair, then leaned over and... The girl hiccuped and hid her lips behind her fingertips. Even the last of the clan couldn't contain her emotions in such a situation. What kind of day is this? Uzumaki shook her head again. But I was very scared that he was going to. Then stop doing that, Uchiha said with annoyance and yanked her friend's hands down, forcing them to drop. Under the fingertips, resentfully pursed and pouting lips were revealed. Blue eyes reproachfully turned from one point to Sasuke. Okay, Orochimaru's protege said conciliatorily, relieved that at least she'd made it in time. Kakashi thinks you're with me, so you can spend the night at my place. Of course, Uchiha wasn't about to elaborate on the fact that she needed Naruto primarily for her own peace of mind. Uzumaki nodded and pushed off the wall, but her legs still refused to support her. Sasuke graciously offered her shoulder, catching her friend's arm and throwing it over her head. It's good that tomorrow is Sunday, Naruto said with obvious relief, shifting some of his weight onto the Uchiha. Yeah, Sasuke agreed. Sundays were good because, regardless of Uzumaki's training or the Uchiha's busy schedule, they had training on this one day off a week, which everyone knew about. And since the village training grounds had long been insufficient for the two war heroines, everyone also knew that Naruto and Sasuke headed out early every Sunday, somewhere far from Konoha, to practice techniques that few could successfully withstand. This time, there was no particular need to leave Konoha, but neither Uchiha nor Uzumaki even mentioned staying in the village. After spending the entire day in the forests and valleys of the Land of Fire, the friends returned to Konoha after dark, pleasantly exhausted and at peace. Now they were walking along a quiet street located not far from the center, where at that hour only a few establishments were open, one of which was the village bathhouse. Maybe we should take a look? Naruto nudged the Uchiha with his elbow. Go ahead, Sasuke responded, curling her lips slightly. At the end of the training session, she got distracted and Uzumaki dislocated her right arm. True, she did reset it, but Uchiha's shoulder was likely still sore. A hot bath might well have helped relieve the pain. When Uchiha pulled the shoujo away from the bathhouse, she was immediately hit in the face by the hot, humid air. It was already late, so the bathhouse was deserted, save for two girls who had fallen silent at the far edge of a small but wide pool of hot water when Sasuke entered. Because of the whitish steam hanging in the air, Uchiha didn't even notice them at first, but she quickly realized her luck when one of them said, "Hello, Sasuke." It turned out to be Ino, of course. Sakura, who was sitting nearby, of course, raised her hand from the water and waved to her. "Naruto, are you coming soon?" Uchiha asked, raising her voice slightly, resisting the urge to slam the shoujo shut. Everything was probably going too well today for something like this not to happen. "Yes, right now. Just let me sort out my hair," came the voice of the fourth's daughter from the locker room. Sasuke sighed and approached the pool cautiously, as if approaching the lair of an unfamiliar enemy. At least Sakura and Ino now knew she wasn't alone. Neither of them would bother her in front of Naruto, or in front of each other either. Their open rivalry for the Uchiha had failed, so it was unlikely they would advertise their intentions without significant results. And Sasuke hadn't given anyone a head start yet, it seemed. Slightly relieved by this thought, Uchiha descended the tiled steps, unwrapped her towel, and sat in the water, closing her eyes to ease the distraction from the two newly emerged problems in her life. However, the problems were clearly in no hurry to be distracted. "Were you training with Naruto outside the village again?" A splash of water was heard, and Ino appeared to Sasuke's right. Orochimaru's protege decided to remain silent, which was quite typical of her. She intended to ignore Yamanaka's instructions anyway. But Yamanaka wasn't about to give in so easily either. "How come you don't get bored training together so much? I think you should know each other's moves by heart by now. Maybe it's time to finally add some variety?" Despite her lowered eyelids, Uchiha was acutely aware of Ino's gaze. Or rather, where it was directed. "Sakura trains with us sometimes," she said, not without a biting vindictiveness. "It's true," the medic's voice confirmed from the left. The last of the clan's members widened her eyes. When had Haruno managed to get here? And she was sitting so close, her shoulders almost touching the Uchiha's, smiling reservedly as if she'd just heard a compliment. Was Sakura trying to flirt? "Three of us probably isn't very comfortable." Sasuke detected a hint of jealousy in Yamanaka's even tone. "It's much more productive to train four of us in pairs," Ino said, as if by accident, touching the Uchiha's thigh underwater. She instinctively straightened up. "Where is Uzumaki?" "We need to talk to Naruto about this." Sasuke's voice grew colder with every word, unlike Yamanaka's. "But I don't think she'll approve." "Why?" Sakura was surprised. "Naruto always tells me to join you more often. Besides, training in pairs can really be very productive. Did you hear that?" The censor smiled, confident in her triumph, and nudged the Uchiha's sore shoulder with her chiseled shoulder blade. TCH! Sasuke winced in pain and pressed her other shoulder against Haruno's. Sakura seemed to blush. She really wanted to express her opinion in an obscene manner. "What's wrong with your shoulder?" Yamanaka wasn't the least bit upset, but rather perked up even more. "It will heal on its own," the last of the clan muttered, suppressing the awakening Sharingan. "I can see!" Haruno practically jumped to her feet on the other side. The Uchiha was about to take a deep breath, ready to resort to the most extreme measures of self-defense, but the shoujo bathhouse door slid aside, and Naruto appeared at the threshold. Sakura jerked back from her side. "Sorry to keep you waiting." "Oh, hi, Ino-chan, Sakura-chan," the future Hokage said, cheerful as always, and, approaching the pool, squeezed between Yamanaka and her friend. "We came up with such a great idea today, didn't we?" "Sasuke?" she asked, looking at the Uchiha. "I never expected that you would sit down next to Ino, whom you hurt with your refusal not long ago," Uzumaki's eyes said expressively. Orochimaru's protege didn't even have anything to say in response. Someone else's fingers run across her face, from her temple down and diagonally, and Naruto involuntarily bites his lower lip, hiding it from a possible touch. The fingers don't stop, moving to her jawline, gliding along its edge, and lifting her head. Before Naruto can even comprehend what's happening, someone else's lips are pressed to the pulsing vein at the base of her neck. In a fit of embarrassment, Naruto tries to push the initiator away, but he intercepts her left hand, continuing his actions. The girl tries to use her other hand, but her right hand is also captured, this time from behind, as if an unknown force pulls her hand back, and more lips touch the inside of her wrist. The other hand, the one behind her, slides over her stomach so that Naruto feels only the tips of the other person's fingers and the warmth of slightly roughened skin. Naruto groans in frustration. She doesn't want this to happen, but at the same time, she has no strength to resist. Her heartbeat rings loudly in her ears. The lips on her neck leave her, and she exhales, only to inhale sharply the next second as they touch her shoulder with a fleeting touch. One hand still holds her wrist, the other reaches behind her back, pulling, forcing her chest forward and up. At the same time, the hand on her stomach slides down to her hip bone, cups her thigh, and pulls it back. Uzumaki feels the contact of her buttocks against someone else's body. The distinct thumping sound is heard again, but Naruto isn't paying attention to it, not to its source. She needs to cope with the whirlpool of emotions engulfing her. Confusion and arousal, but without fear, because she surprisingly reverently trusts both. "Naruto." The girl turns her head to the side. She doesn't want to hear her name. The lips that had left a mark on her right wrist seize the moment and touch her cheekbone. A wave of heat spreads from that spot throughout her body, but Uzumaki closes her eyes. She doesn't want to see who's behind her. The hand on her shoulder blades moves forward again, running from her waist up along her ribs, the angle between her index finger and thumb finding itself under the soft weight of her breast. "Naruto, knock again." "No, not now." To respond means to acknowledge that all this is happening to her, to accept not only herself but also the voice that belongs to her. She feels the breath of the one in front of her fall below her collarbones, and she involuntarily tenses up, while the palm from her knuckle slides back up to her stomach, pulling her back, forcing her entire back against the one behind her. The girl involuntarily lowers her gaze, and an even more insistent pounding sounds in her head. "Naruto, it's me, Shikamaru." The one in front lifts his head, and Uzumaki clearly sees every strand of hair in the protruding tail, and from Nara's gaze a shudder runs through the body, causing the forced daughter to jump up on the futon and hear already in reality. "Are you home?" "Miko-chan." A panic thought flashed through Naruto's mind, causing her to unravel herself from the rumpled blanket, crawl on all fours over Sasuke, who was sleeping, her hands folded primly on her stomach, and run for the door. Yesterday, after the bath, they'd stopped at Ichiraku and ordered delivery for the morning. This had been at the Uchiha's insistence, knowing she couldn't avoid noodles for breakfast anyway, so at least it wouldn't be instant ramen, but a complete and balanced meal. So it didn't even occur to Uzumaki that it could be anyone other than the ramen shop owner's daughter until she opened the door and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting," and didn't find Shikamaru standing frozen on her doorstep, his hand raised to knock. Naruto, wearing only a loose t-shirt and with her light hair loose and tousled, perked up and, embarrassed, covered her chest with her hand. "Sure, Shikamaru?" she stammered. "What are you doing here?" "Well, I brought some documents for you to look over before class." The boy handed Uzumaki a folder, which she took and, without even thinking, used it to cover the barely visible underwear beneath her t-shirt, thereby drawing Nara's attention even more to her legs. "Good morning, by the way. Am I too early?" "No, what are you saying? I just like to lie in bed." After these words, Naruto bit her tongue, because images from a recent dream involuntarily flashed in her head, interpreting her words in a very ambiguous way, if not for Shikamaru, then for herself. "Then maybe we could have breakfast together?" Nara continued. "Shall I come in?" "Oh." The future Hokage began out of habit, but stopped herself, even though the boy was about to take a step. "No." And, misjudging her strength, she slammed her palm into the doorframe, blocking his path. "You see, I have Sasuke here," she said hastily, searching for an excuse. "I don't think she'd be pleased if you saw her the way she is now." "Oh, I see," Shikamaru said with a hint of disappointment. "Then I won't disturb you. See you in class?" "Yeah, see you later." Naruto smiled with relief. "Bye." The girl slammed the door without even waiting for Nara to turn around. Belatedly, her stomach twisted with excitement. What just happened? Was it a dream? How could she have dreamed something like that? And why Shikamaru of all people? The fourth's daughter walked from the hallway into the kitchen, adjacent to the only room in her apartment, and dropped the folder on the table. She clearly had no time for documents right now. "And why did you have to hide behind my appearance?" Sasuke asked ironically from the futon. The yukata she slept in didn't even rise above her knees the entire night. "And I was supposed to let him in, even though I wasn't supposed to accept his feelings?" Uzumaki snapped back. Someone clearly wasn't in the mood for jokes this morning. Well, so what? Unlike Naruto, Uchiha was in a great mood. Fortunately, all the inconveniences of the night, in the form of his friend's habit of the star-shaped pose, were compensated for by just one morning scene. "I would have tactfully left before Shikamaru noticed me. By the way, believe me, you look great," which he couldn't help but appreciate. When was the last time she'd had such an opportunity to tease Uzumaki? And how could she not have a good laugh? Although the future Hokage wasn't about to give her any more reasons. "I'll kill you after I take a shower," she threatened Naruto with displeasure, running her hand under his shirt and scratching his stomach in an absolutely unladylike manner. There was a knock at the door. "And open up, Miko." The Uchiha's friend's voice reached her from the bathroom. Despite all of Sasuke's snide comments before, during, and after breakfast, Uzumaki hoped Shikamaru hadn't paid much attention to the scene that morning. At least, that he hadn't taken offense. "Thanks for dropping off the file this morning." Naruto began immediately, appearing in the archives a couple of hours after the incident. In her normal uniform, and with 2 ponytails on her head, she felt much more confident. "I read it, and I actually have some questions." She walked past the table where Shikamaru was already sitting, put a folder on it, and went to the shelves with scrolls and books. "I'm glad that's true." Nara responded somewhat thoughtfully and changed the subject while the future Hokage was picking up the reference books she needed. "Does Sasuke often spend the night at your place?" Busy searching for Naruto, she didn't even think about the subtext of the question. "Periodically. Sometimes I'm with her, sometimes she's with me." The girl reached for a book on the top shelf, but could only catch it with her fingertips. "And besides, you still constantly have lunch together, train, and spend your free time." Shikamaru voiced his observations, getting up from his seat with a clear intention of coming over and helping. "Yeah," Uzumaki responded carefree, jumping up and successfully grabbing the book by the spine. Nara sat back down. The girl approached, unloaded the collected books and scrolls onto the table, and sat down in her chair. "Have you ever thought that Sasuke needs more interaction with other people?" Shikamaru asked. The question clearly puzzled Naruto. "Sasuke is communicating with others," she finally answered and began to organize what she had collected on the shelves, unsealing scrolls and opening books to the necessary pages. "Yes, but not like with you." Nara took the armrests of the chair the girl was sitting on and turned it towards him. Uzumaki gasped and clutched the open book to her chest. She remembered what had happened in her morning dream again at the wrong time. The boy's hands remained on the armrests. "Sasuke is used to communicating with you. She feels comfortable that way, but she won't be able to improve her relationships with her other former friends that way." Naruto tried not to look the guy in the eyes, because that was, in fact, the last thing she saw in her dream. "She's settled in here since the war, yes, but if you really want to help her return, she needs to learn to interact with other people." Although at the same time Nara was knocking on her door and calling her, so his voice ended up in her dream, and then her brain simply completed the picture. "I can help you. For example, we could have lunch together, the three of us, and see how freely Sasuke can behave." So it's impossible to say for sure that she dreamed of Shikamaru specifically, but then again, the very fact that she had such a dream. Suddenly, Nara leaned forward towards her, and the future Hokage literally pressed herself into the back of the chair, involuntarily looking into his eyes and swallowing nervously. "Naruto, are you listening to me?" Uzumaki, still clutching the book tightly to her chest, opened her mouth to utter some general remark, as she'd only vaguely heard him mention Sasuke, when the door to the archives began to open. Naruto was relieved that she'd be able to avoid a direct answer, but suddenly, someone she'd been completely surprised to see stood on the threshold. Hello, said Sixth. "How are classes going?" "Kakashi-sensei?" the girl blurted out in surprise and resignation. It would be better if this was just another dream. The nightmare of her life, but a dream nonetheless. "Oh, don't mind me. I just came to pick up some documents," Ataki explained, as always extremely friendly, and actually headed towards the shelves. "So what questions do you have?" Shikamaru immediately changed his tone to a businesslike one. The forest's daughter turned back to the table. It was a good thing Nara had removed his hands from her armrests the moment Hataki appeared. As for the latter, Naruto only hoped she could hold out until the copy ninja had finished what he needed and left the archives. Having safely checked in at headquarters that morning, Sasuke was eager to leave the building as quickly as possible. She didn't want to ruin her day by meeting Ino, but Yamanaka had an uncanny sense of when the Snake Sannin's protege might have even a minute's free time. And now, the Uchiha encountered a censor right at the exit, nearly running into her from around the corner. But some gods favored Sasuke. Ino was with her colleagues, who were also in a hurry. "Good morning," Yamanaka greeted, motioning to her teammates that she would catch up with them. "Whatever it is," the girl answered, not very satisfied. "How's your shoulder?" "Thank you. I'd better. Sorry, I'm in a hurry," Uchiha said almost without pause, and tried to get around Ino, but she didn't allow it. "I know you're in a hurry, Sasuke," Yamanaka said, as if she actually knew where the object of her interest was headed at any given moment. "But I wanted to tell you that I'm starting to lose my patience." The Uchiha managed to keep her composure, though she was almost ready to show off her joy. It seemed the end of the siege was near. She just had to keep up appearances. But to Uzumaki's great horror, Kakashi did not leave the archives, not 15 minutes after the start of his classes with Nara, not an hour later, and not even 2. He was taking documents and books from the shelves, examining them at the next table, making notes. He was probably working on some problem. But that didn't make Naruto any less nervous. It had been a while since she'd been in his presence for so long. forcing all her control and self-defense systems to work at full capacity, which, of course, was quickly beginning to fail. Extended ambushes and/or sieges had never been her specialty. Shikamaru was behaving completely normally, for which the girl was almost grateful, except that normal meant a freedom of two-way communication that hadn't even begun to materialize after what had happened that morning. What had happened that morning in Naruto's head, it must be said. The girl avoided looking at him, trying to prevent him from coming closer than a third of a meter, though she answered his questions promptly and without missing the point. For the time being. The closer it got to lunch, the more often Uzumaki glanced at the clock hanging above the door. "Sasuke is late," the future Hokage noticed after the 4th hour of classes. I noticed this out loud involuntarily, because I had been figuring out an administrative problem for about half an hour, which, if I hadn't been bothered by the constant monitoring of the situation, I would have solved in 10 minutes. "Did something happen?" Hatake suddenly appeared from Shikamaru's side. "No, not at all." Naruto quickly shook her head, trying to keep her smile from looking too sour. For a few seconds, he even had to look at his sensei, hoping that would convince him a little. But no. Kakashi stared at Uzumaki long and intently, and then turned to the boy reading a book. "Shikamaru, there's a request from the stone for a specialist analyst. Would you like to take on this mission?" To say that Nara was surprised is to say nothing. He didn't say it outright, but from the slight twitch on Shikamaru's face, Naruto knew he'd been caught off guard. And judging by the quick glance Nara gave her, no, he didn't think she'd asked Hatake to change her mentor. The fourth daughter even shook her head. "You don't want him to agree?" The sixth looked at Naruto, interpreting her gesture in his own way. "No, not really, I just—" the girl began, finding herself in a bad situation. "Send someone from the department. What's the problem?" Shikamaru said, leaning back in his chair. "They hardly need any specialist. They need the best," Kakashi replied. "Don't you know one?" To her shame, Uzumaki realized that she would not mind if Shikamaru was sent on this mission. "Since when does Konoha throw away its best specialists?" Nara even put his book down. "It's temporary," Hatake assured him. "No more than 2 months, judging by the request." "What about Naruto?" "I'll also run off somewhere at that time," the girl interjected before she thought. "We can't interrupt her training," Nara continued. "And if you really want to send me, maybe we should send her along with me. She needs to improve her diplomacy, too." No matter how much of a dandelion Naruto was, she knew all too well what sometimes happened between shinobi of different genders during long missions with a partner. And she remembered Shikamaru's confession, too. And about that morning nap, damn it. But no answer was required from her. Kakashi walked around Nara, approached her chair from behind, and placed his palms on the girl's shoulders. "I can take care of her training." It wasn't even that phrase that shocked Uzumaki. It had merely flashed through her mind, for just a moment, that there had been 2 people in her dream. For the first time in her life, Naruto was ready to surrender voluntarily, under any conditions. "Maybe you should ask what Naruto herself wants?" Shikamaru's voice grew strangely cold, but the future Hokage had no time for that now. "I want to be with Sasuke," Uzumaki thought and answered resignedly, withdrawing further and further into herself. "Why has everything been going wrong since the very beginning of the month?" As if on purpose. "First Shikamaru kisses, then—" Wait, the beginning of the month? To the surprise of both men, Naruto, who had been slowly curling up into a ball in her chair, suddenly straightened up. "The beginning of the month," the girl repeated out loud. "Sakura-chan will kill me." Ignoring the hands on her shoulders, Uzumaki leaned on the table and swung herself over it feet first. Then she turned around and spoke quickly. "We have a checkup every first Monday of the month. Sasuke has it before lunch, and I have it after. Sakura-chan's already waiting. See you tomorrow." With these words, Naruto ran out of the archives, leaving Hatake and Nara in the same positions they'd frozen in. Now she was not worried about any mental anguish. Haruno Sakura really did not like latecomers. Sasuke had long since ceased to deny her connection with Uzumaki. They understood each other in ways no one else did, perceiving each other in infinitely multifaceted ways. While Naruto always saw a glimmer of light in the Uchiha, Sasuke always saw a glimmer of darkness in Uzumaki. And it was precisely this contradiction that made their bond particularly strong, balanced, and profound. It was as if they stood at opposite ends of a seesaw, yet holding hands, which stabilized the balance. But right now, Sasuke wouldn't mind a direct telepathic channel. Naruto, I've already pulled you out of your ass twice, now it's your turn to save the day. Uchiha thought angrily to herself, and with good reason. Haruno Sakura was lying on her, sprawled out on the hospital bed. In fact, Sasuke was rushing to her checkup that morning. She wasn't particularly excited about it, but she couldn't help but show up. Haruno's recent behavior suggested that Sakura still hadn't quite figured out what to do with her confession, and the Uchiha sincerely hoped the medic wouldn't flirt at work. Ideally, Haruno would have calmed down too. Sasuke was so reluctant to disrupt the fragile relationship they'd established since her return to Konoha. But things hadn't gone according to plan yet again. The examination itself went more than well, and without incident. Sakura asked only relevant questions and was as professional as ever, but Uchiha still felt some vague undertone of discontent hanging in the air. Did something happen? Sasuke asked after the examination was complete. She knew she might regret the question, but she had already taken responsibility for Haruno, so she couldn't remain silent. What do you mean, happened? Sakura stood at the desk with her back to the Uchiha, who couldn't see her face, but the fact that she'd answered a question with a question didn't bode well. The Snake Sannin's protege considered again whether she should get involved in all this, and then remembered Naruto. Uzumaki was next for the examination, and she would definitely ask Haruno what was wrong. And even if Sakura didn't admit her interest in the Uchiha, Naruto would still be the one to heal souls. And why, exactly? Was it always her? Why was Sasuke any worse? The spirit of healthy competition spurred her to be the first to provide psychological support to Sakura. It just seemed like you were unhappy about something. Uchiha began abstractly, rising from the couch like a snake and starting to approach her victim. Even if that's the case, does it bother you? Haruno's voice tinged with resentment. It's not only Naruto who cares about you. The last of the clan answered quite honestly, although rather evasively. Sakura turned and seemed about to say something very decisive, but since Sasuke was already standing less than a step away from her, Haruno suddenly lost all her zeal. Almost there. How does Uzumaki do it? Open up to me. Sakura was embarrassed. Very much so. Sasuke triumphed, pleased with herself. But when had she considered the long-term consequences of some of her words? Never. Haruno began, not looking up at the Snake Sannin's protege and awkwardly adjusting her hair. I really wanted to help you with your shoulder yesterday, but it seems like you just got angry. Sasuke was even upset that it was so simple. I wasn't angry at you, I was angry at my shoulder, she explained. The Uchiha even liked being nice sometimes. And today it's fine, so it's not worth your attention. Ah, I see. Is that all you were worried about? Sasuke asked, almost sympathetically. Yes, Sakura answered, but suddenly changed her mind. No. Then what else is it? Uchiha made a note to casually let Naruto know how she helped Haruno. But at that moment, Sakura carefully raised her wide-open green eyes to Sasuke, and that's when the alarm bell of intuition finally started ringing in someone's head. I really like you, Sasuke. Oh no. I didn't finish what I said then. Haruno licked her lips. I understand that my feelings for you may seem very strange. The Uchiha tried to take a discreet step back. The medic followed her. I didn't accept them right away myself. Sasuke suddenly longed to be somewhere else. Or better yet, in a completely different universe with a different world order. where chakra manifests only through certain crystals, for example. But I thought for a long time about our relationship, our history. However, she already seemed to have found herself in some kind of perverted homosexual universe, where the opinions of some are more important than the opinions of others. Maybe the fact that you returned to the village is a sign? If only Itachi were alive, he could have been asked in a brotherly way to make a move on Sakura. At least on Sakura. A sign for both you and me? No, she didn't come back because of Haruno. Not at all. But how could she explain that to her dear little sister? The Uchiha, still retreating, didn't even feel the couch appear beneath her knees. She lost her balance for a second and fell backwards. Sakura, also tripping on level ground, fell on top of her. Their gazes met. Sasuke. Now Sasuke truly panicked. Naruto wasn't responding to her mental entreaties, and Haruno seemed to interpret this mutual sluggishness as another sign. Acting on reflex, the last of the clan abruptly dumped the living cargo next to her onto her back and, by inertia, fell on top of him. The medic started, but then froze, staring at the Uchiha with wide eyes, like a bird that had flown too close to a snake out of curiosity. Sasuke urgently needed an escape plan. Sakura-chan, I'm so very awkwardly late. Oh, Naruto. The medic, suddenly realizing what she had just done, pushed the Uchiha away from her rather awkwardly and jumped up from the couch. Sasuke and I were a little late. An unforgettable blush played across Sakura's cheeks. Let's reschedule the examination for tomorrow. Haruto quickly adjusted her uniform and literally flew out of the treatment room past Uzumaki, who stood dumbfounded in the doorway. Uchiha sighed with relief. In vain. Sasuke. She knew that growl all too well. Only the future Hokage could pronounce her name so gutturally and menacingly. But the last of the clan still didn't have time to react in time, because she had already been grabbed by the chest, lifted off the couch, and slammed with her back into the wall. Want to explain? The fiery red chakra of the Ninetales began to manifest around Naruto. Her friend may have taken after her father in looks, but she definitely inherited her mother's personality. At least, that's what Uchiha heard about the bloody Hinabra. Calm down, Dobe, Sasuke said, gathering herself together. You've got it all wrong. You have 1 minute. Uzumaki threatened, the chakra around her already taking on the shape of the Kyuubi. But Uchiha knew how to present the information even faster, because the truth for her now meant at least intact bones. Sakura considers herself a lesbian. What? It worked. Naruto blinked, and the beast-like pupil in her eyes turned back into a normal one. The chakra stopped. She considers herself a lesbian. Sasuke repeated. The future Hokage even let her go. What? How? How long ago? Uzumaki took a couple of steps back. I don't know how long ago it was, but a couple of days ago, I received a confession from her and an offer to date. Uchiha answered. So now you? Naruto's face expressed an indescribable degree of surprise. No. Sasuke rolled her eyes. But what is now? Just an accident. Does Sakura know about this? Uchiha pursed her lips, but remained silent. In fact, Naruto had always sincerely believed that Shikamaru was the best match for Sabaku no Temari. From the moment she met them on the first day of her return from a 2-year journey with Jiraiya. Uzumaki was certain the two were destined to be together. Moreover, she had seen how they interacted before and during the Fourth War, and she was genuinely happy for her friend. And if Nara was truly struggling after his father's death and needed someone to support him, why couldn't Temari help him? Because they were separated by a 3-day journey between Suna and Konoha? Well, he could have just taken her away on a mission together, so that things would work out for them. Thinking like this, Uzumaki, however, didn't even think about shifting responsibility for Shikamaru onto someone else's shoulders, but she wanted to support him as a friend, not as a girlfriend. That is, as a friend-girlfriend, not a girlfriend-girlfriend. You're unusually silent today, Nara noted. The future Hokage nodded absent-mindedly, lost in thought, and drawing little people on parchment. Or take Sakura. Naruto was a little upset that Haruno had, according to the Uchiha, switched to girls, but the future Hokage clearly wasn't competent enough in such matters to even form an opinion on her friend's new sexual orientation. Well, girls are okay, but then again, she's Sakura-chan. At least Ino should be the one to ask for advice. Incidentally, Uzumaki met her that morning at headquarters, and Yamanaka directly asked about Sasuke, whom she said she wanted to talk to. Naruto was also worried about the heiress of the Censor clan. How did she really react to the Uchiha's rejection? "Whoever takes this document after you will be surprised," Shikamaru said, alluding to Uzumaki's handwriting in the scroll's margins. "By the way, what do you think about the paired mission to the stone? It seems you haven't seen anyone from there in a while?" "Yeah," Naruto nodded, lost in her thoughts. By the way, does Ino know about Sakura's interest? Maybe that's what she wants to talk to the Uchiha about. "So we're going on a mission together?" Shikamaru continued. "Maybe we should consult with Nara? He's a smart guy and should have something useful to offer." "Naruto?" "Listen, Shikamaru." Uzumaki stopped drawing and turned to the guy. "I want to consult with you." Nara was a little surprised, but did not object. "Imagine, hypothetically, that two people simultaneously show you attention," Naruto began, choosing her words carefully. "And one of them makes a rather bold move, takes the initiative, but you turn them down because you're sure they're not the one for you. And they keep trying to meet you, offering to spend time together to train." She couldn't help but emphasize the word with her intonation, but hoped Shikamaru hadn't guessed the real subtext. The guy's face lengthened a little in surprise, but he remained silent for now. "But there's another one who's also interested in you," Uzumaki continued. "You're quite close to him, maybe not that close, but let's say you were connected through teamwork, but you also share something more. Succession, for example," Naruto blurted out, to deflect any suspicion from Haruno. "However, this isn't the kind of intimacy that makes you want a romantic relationship, you understand?" She looked confidentially at the Nara. "And this person suddenly confesses their feelings to you." Shikamaru's eyebrows twitched for a second. Uzumaki only hoped he'd understood correctly, but he didn't suspect anything. At least, he didn't think about Sakura or Ino. "And are you? That is, I'm going to refuse this loved one too?" Nara finally asked. "Probably. I'm not sure of anything anymore," the fourth's daughter answered honestly, becoming even more upset. "Does that first one still have a chance of success?" Nara asked again. "I don't know." Uzumaki's expression faded completely. "At first, I was sure he wasn't, but he seems quite sincere." Shikamaru somehow perked up. "Then maybe we should give this first one another chance?" he said. "I already have a close relationship with the second one, especially since I don't want to ruin it, and the first one clearly needs my attention." Uzumaki looked at the boy. Should she at least tell Sasuke to listen to Yamanaka? "Do you think so?" "I'm sure," Nara replied, smiling. "After all, the first one might not have immediately decided on such a bold step as kissing him." Shikamaru coughed and trailed off, but Naruto didn't even notice. After all, everything wasn't as simple as Nara might have thought. "What if?" She leaned forward and lowered her voice. A spark seemed to flash in Shikamaru's eyes. "Well, let's just say," the future Hokage hoped she wouldn't arouse too much suspicion with her question, because the Nara was already leaning forward. "That, for example, one of those two is your gender?" Shikamaru froze. Uzumaki politely waited for an answer, looking him straight in the eye and seemingly encouraging him with her whole demeanor. But the only thing Nara could manage was, "Do I often spend time with this same-sex friend?" Naruto threw up her hands, realizing she'd started this whole thing for nothing. If she did answer, which of Sakura and Ino would she change into the opposite gender? That would only complicate matters further, and would clearly affect Shikamaru's advice. Uzumaki pulled away with a sigh. "Sorry, I just pestered you with stupid questions and wasted your time. Please forget what I said," she said, sheepishly picking up the first book she could find. "Perhaps we should get back to our lesson?" "Yes, of course," Nara replied after a short pause. He seemed quite puzzled, but Naruto sincerely hoped he didn't understand who they were talking about and would quickly forget everything. Whether this was true or not, Shikamaru remained extremely silent until Sasuke arrived, clearly pondering something. When the Uchiha arrived, the Nara quickly dismissed them, although he had studied Sasuke carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. He really didn't understand who Uzumaki was asking for advice for. When Naruto went to check on Sakura after lunch, Sasuke faced a crucial philosophical question: what to do? It was vitally important for her not to run into the Yamanaka. At the same time, she definitely couldn't join the Uzumaki for obvious reasons. So, after some thought, the Uchiha decided to drop in on Kakashi for old time's sake. He'd certainly find something to occupy his former student. And Sixth actually found it. He downloaded it until late in the evening, but at least Sasuke was distracted. However, as she approached the house after dark, Uchiha quickly suspected something was wrong. All the traps she'd set at the entrance were unblocked, and her last resort, a kunai laced with a powerful sedative, fired from a mini crossbow in the event of unauthorized entry through the door, lay guiltily and forlornly on the floor. Having paid tribute to the intelligence and recklessness of the genius who had decided to break into Uchiha Sasuke's house through the front door, the Snake Sanin's protege reversed the kunai that had appeared in her palm and silently moved into the deep darkness of the apartment, seemingly a mirror image of Naruto's. Her eyes strained, adjusting to the darkness, but the Uchiha was in no hurry to activate her Sharingan. She had no plans to destroy half the building. The kitchen area visible from the hallway, as well as the bathroom and toilet, showed no signs of someone else's presence. But even before Sasuke stepped onto the tiled floor, a voice rang out from the only small room. "I'm almost bored already." The Uchiha, every fiber of her being prepared for mortal combat, found herself in the room before she could even recognize the voice. A dozen candles, covered with rice paper lanterns, immediately ignited in the previously darkened room. The scent of incense, with hints of natural aphrodisiacs, drifted through the air. On a futon in the center of the room, clearly designed for two, sat Ino, in the languid pose of a demonic tempter. Her hair was loose and artistically scattered over her bare shoulders, and her only clothing, a dark red, austere yet richly embroidered kimono, was held up only at the chest and, perhaps, by a belt, in a way completely unknown to the Uchiha and nature. The slit in the silk fabric revealed Yamanaka's shapely calves and slender ankles. "Ino!" Sasuke began, midly calling out to all the gods, lowering her kunai and pondering the best way to resolve this situation. There was no need to ask why the censor had entered her house. "Oh, sorry for dropping by uninvited," Yamanaka said, standing up. "But I thought it was time to do something, and maybe a little exercise wouldn't hurt." The censor, swaying her hips, with true feline grace began to approach the Uchiha, who was frozen in the doorway. Besides, girls love surprises, don't they? "No," Sasuke blurted out as a defensive reflex. Ino snorted charmingly, involuntarily conjuring up the thought that any non-shinobi, regardless of gender or age, would likely already be at the feet of the embodiment of eroticism that Yamanaka was currently conjuring. And how come Ino's kimono doesn't fall off her chest? Damn, did she just think about Ino's breasts? Uchiha tensed. "Since you're here, let me ask, why me?" The last of the clan decided to stall for time, since Yamanaka was already just a step away, and Sasuke still had no practical plan for getting rid of the girl. She logically considered her apartment the last outpost of personal space, something she couldn't afford to lose. At the same time, this same consideration did not prevent us from beginning to retreat from the approaching danger. "Maybe because I like you?" The censor answered with a question, and Uchiha shuddered slightly. She'd been hearing that phrase too often lately. What about Sakura? You're close friends. She might well agree to help you. Sakura? Ino raised one beautiful eyebrow in a very sexy way. What are you saying? She's so innocent. I wouldn't want to be just the host. Yamanaka's gaze made Sasuke's seemingly long-hardened skin crawl. Everywhere. No, this connection, even hypothetically, wouldn't lead to anything good. And then, the Uchiha bumped her back into the wall. Wasn't her kitchen only 4 steps wide? So you're into girls now? Sasuke continued to drag her feet, involuntarily raising the kunai in front of her again. No, Yamanaka replied simply, and with a very smooth and fluid movement, she spun around the weapon and found herself within the former apostate's half-circle. I just wanted to experiment. Ino breathed sensually when less than the width of a palm remained between their lips. On the edge of her consciousness, Uchiha thought that the censor seemed to be wearing no underwear at all under the kimono. Do you understand what the problem is, Ino? Sasuke realized she was becoming less and less coherent, which was a very bad sign. I'm just into boys. That explains why you've been running away from me so much. Yamanaka smiled slyly. But I'm sure you'll quickly change your mind if you try. Well, it seems the censor left the Uchiha no choice. Then show me yourself, Orochimaru's protege said evenly, lowering her hand with the weapon. Ino smiled triumphantly, took a couple of steps back just as smoothly, turned her back to Sasuke, and pulled at the belt of her kimono. The garment, flowing smoothly, slid to the floor. But when the censor turned around to assess the Uchiha's expression, she was no longer in the apartment. Frankly speaking, Saya was quite surprised when she opened the door after a long and extremely persistent knock and saw Haruno Sakura standing on her threshold, her hair disheveled and nervously looking around. The medic should have said something, but she, apparently considering the mere open door an invitation, quickly walked into the apartment to the window and, pressing her back against the wall, scanned the accessible rooftops with a tenacious but hasty glance. Then she decisively lowered the curtains and finally looked at Saya. Another moment. Haruno was there and slammed the door, locking it all the way. Sakura-chan, I'm certainly not against some intimate privacy. The girl began, her face as expressionless as ever, but was interrupted. What do you mean? The medic said irritably, then her features relaxed. Oh, right. Haruno folded her index and middle fingers, muttered something, and leaned forward sharply, leaning against the doorframe. A slight spasm contorted her face, as if struck by an electric shock, and a shudder ran through her entire body. The sound of a reversal was heard, and Uchiha Sasuke appeared before Saya from the rapidly fading smoke. A very nervous and twitchy Uchiha Sasuke. It's getting more and more interesting, the girl commented, stretching her lips into a smile. Sasuke, I can't do this anymore. Uzumaki wailed mournfully, burying her face in Orochimaru's protege's shoulder and sobbing ostentatiously into her shoulder. The Uchiha instinctively patted her friend on the back. Instead of lunch, they sat in the empty lounge room in the Hokage Tower, indulging in apathy, one in tears, the other in tears. Shikamaru came to see me this morning and asked if we could have breakfast, and I had no reason to refuse. After 20 minutes of abstract lamentation, Naruto finally began to say something definitive, but the girl was still only half listening. And then, in the archives, he was pestering you, Sasuke asked without much empathy. The sight of the 4th Hokage's tearful daughter strangely didn't surprise her, even though it was the Uchiha who had saved her from the Nara's company half an hour ago, yet again. True, the 6th Hokage was also in the archives at that very moment. No, he called Kakashi-sensei for some reason, and everything was really bad, eh? Naruto burst into tears again, and the last of the clan even envied her friend's freedom in expressing her emotions. Besides, while Uzumaki was suffering because of today, Sasuke was still trying to recover from yesterday. Unable to resist Ino's onslaught, she abandoned her own apartment, which she considered a complete defeat. But it wasn't just the Yamanakas. Putting her pride aside and fleeing potential pursuit, the Uchiha resorted to one of Orochimaru's old tricks, an improved version of Hinge, which allowed the user to not only assume another's appearance, but also adapt to their energy. More precisely, it worked in reverse. First, one had to mimic the pattern of someone else's chakra, and then their appearance would automatically change. The perfect countermeasure against Shinobi's sensors tuned to a specific person. The only problem was that mimicry of someone else's chakra required a thorough understanding of the person you were channeling. Sasuke couldn't copy Uzumaki. Her energy was always mingled with that of the Ninetales, and it was unlikely anyone would be able to replicate such a pattern. So the Uchiha had to mimic another person she knew well, Sakura Haruno. Saya had to explain all of this. She also had to explain who she was hiding from and why. She also had to explain why she couldn't go to Naruto. She also had to explain why she couldn't go to Sakura. She also had to explain that if Saya told anyone, she would die. "You still owe me for the tea." The former Root member didn't hesitate to remind Sasuke even after the whole long story, but she allowed him to stay. Today, Uchiha had to resort to advanced camouflage techniques, making her way to the Hokage Tower through back alleys and courtyards. She also diligently suppressed her chakra, but still flinched at every slight rustle. "It was all really bad." Naruto's voice, buried in her shoulder, brought her back to reality. "Because Kakashi-sensei was sitting with us, and Shikamaru was busy with diplomatic questions. But how was I supposed to answer them if all I was thinking about was keeping my cool? And then Kakashi-sensei, the ambassadors from the Mist are arriving tomorrow. You should be with me at the meetings." She somehow found the strength to mimic the copy ninja's perpetually calm tone. "How am I supposed to attend these meetings if I'm about to start fainting in his presence?" Sasuke automatically patted her shoulder again. "I want everything to be like before." Uzumaki continued to wail. "I want Shikamaru to be just my friend, and Sensei to be just Sensei. And I want to stop having erotic dreams about them." "I didn't dream. What?" Orochimaru's protege thought she'd misheard due to her daze. But Naruto didn't notice her question. "What should I do, Sasuke?" The fourth's daughter drawled into her friendly shoulder. "Run away from the village?" Uchiha blurted out before she could even realize that this was the very thought that had been swirling around in her subconscious for the last 10 hours. Uzumaki stopped moaning. She straightened up and raised her head. She looked at Sasuke with tear-stained, puffy eyes, and answered firmly, "No." "Why?" Uchiha asked, sounding genuinely surprised. "Because running away won't solve the problem," the fourth's daughter said firmly. "Is there a problem?" Sasuke feigned innocence. Naruto looked at her reproachfully. "But judge for yourself." The last of the clan began, suddenly becoming animated. Suddenly, the idea of leaving the village seemed quite reasonable, especially if she could persuade Uzumaki to do it too. "You'll be able to distance yourself from Kakashi and get your thoughts in order. While you're gone, maybe Shikamaru will get over his harassment, whether he accepts the mission to the stone or not. Ino will get over it just as much, and Sakura will probably find herself a boyfriend," Uchiha added silently, looking hopefully at Naruto. "No, Sasuke, that's a bad option," she answered just as stubbornly. "Why?" Orochimaru's protege persisted, rising from her seat and pacing the room. "We don't even need to take a mission. I'll talk to Kakashi, tell him we need rest and training. I might even tell him I've noticed Shikamaru paying more attention to you, so you need to be protected from any worries about your friend. And he'll be happy to send us on another 2-year journey. Besides, we'll gain experience. We'll train you in diplomacy ourselves." The Uchiha was already building castles in the air with plans for privacy and tranquility, but she met her friend's gaze and fell silent. Uzumaki looked at her for a long time, and then asked directly, "You didn't talk to either Ino or Sakura, right?" The castles in the air of a bright future instantly burst like soap bubbles. There was simply no point in lying any longer. "Yes, I didn't say that. Sasuke admitted. Naruto increased the degree of reproach in her gaze. What can I talk to them about? Uchiha began to explain, displeased. Ino refuses to take my refusal seriously. Yesterday, she even tried to seduce me in my own home. I even had to run away from her to Saya. Maybe next time she'll try to kill me right at headquarters? What about Sakura-chan? While the future Hokage could still forgive Sasuke for running away from the pushy Yamanaka, after all, it was really Sasuke's business, who he slept with. She was much more worried about Haruno Naruto. It must be said that yesterday, during the examination, she and Sakura hadn't been having a good conversation. She immediately dismissed the earlier scene with Sasuke as a coincidence, and answered even the most innocuous questions with restraint and evasiveness, as if she were upset with Uzumaki. I'm not yet such a monster as to accept the advances of someone who is like a little sister to me. The last of the clan snapped, continuing to pace the room. So why don't you tell her about it? Naruto wondered. If she finds out how I feel about her, she definitely won't leave me alone. Orochimaru's protege retorted with conviction. Sasuke, you can't leave things as they are. If you care so much about Sakura, then find a white horse somewhere and take her away from me to the ends of the earth. I'll be extremely grateful. The Uchiha couldn't resist. Naruto's heart sank. If only she could resolve this situation herself. Well, at least you're not attracted to your former sensei. Uzumaki sighed, thinking about when things had become so difficult on their team. I'd rather pine for Kakashi than endure the persistent attention of two members of my own sex. Sasuke snorted, sitting back down next to the forced daughter. Sakura just needs to understand that Ino's pink dream isn't for her. You shouldn't say that, Naruto muttered. It's her choice, and we have to respect it. Do you even believe what you're saying? Uchiha asked, not without irony. Uzumaki remained silent. Then watch out. Sasuke turned to her sharply. If Sakura keeps pestering me, the Uchiha leaned toward the future Hokage. Sooner or later it could lead to this. The Snake Sanin's protege gently ran the back of her hand over Naruto's cheek. Or this. Her voice dropped to an intimate whisper. And her hand landed on the girl's knee and slid up her thigh. Are you saying you're already having erotic dreams? Uzumaki looked at Sasuke with distrust, completely calm about the minimal distance between them. So boys' time? A calm voice suddenly rang out from the entrance to the break room, like a bucket of cold water poured over your head. The friends turned their heads simultaneously. Ino stood at the threshold, her face frozen into a mask that even Saya would have envied. There was a brief pause, in the silence of which one could probably hear the forced daughter blinking her eyelashes a couple of times. Suddenly, without a word, Yamanaka turned and disappeared from the doorway as if nothing had happened. The girls remained seated, Sasuke with his hand on Uzumaki's thigh and Naruto with a completely surprised and innocent look. Now I have no idea what awaits me, Uchiha said, as if she had just signed her own death warrant. After Ino left, the door to the break room remained open. Realizing that the possibility of a spontaneous resolution to the situation had just vanished into thin air, Sasuke quickly considered other options. Now Yamanaka probably thought it was all Naruto, meaning she'd likely come at him from that direction next time. How could she warn Uzumaki of this? Hastily formulating a new strategy, the Uchiha instinctively jumped up from her seat, walked to the door, and was about to close it, almost closing it when someone suddenly pushed the door open from the other side. Acting on pure intuition, Orochimaru's protege slid against the wall, ensuring that the newcomer wouldn't see her without turning his head at least 90 degrees. And just in time, Haruno Sakura burst into the lounge, determined and menacing as a herd of bulls, and strode with a determined, belligerent air straight toward Naruto, who remained seated. Hello, Sakura-cha. Uzumaki, who had been watching Sasuke's actions, didn't even have time to finish her sentence before the medic slapped her. Ouch! What for? The forced daughter hid the back of her head behind her hands, apparently to avoid another attack. For that! Sakura exclaimed. What kind of stupid jokes are you playing? What? Naruto asked, genuinely surprised. Such! Haruno raised her voice even more. Why is half the village talking about how I allegedly showed up on Saya's doorstep late last night looking extremely agitated, entered her house without asking, and then had the lights on behind the drawn curtains for half the night? I spent the whole night in the hospital, and I definitely couldn't have been at the home of that phallic-obsessed ANBU artist. Sakura hovered over Uzumaki like a hawk over a lamb, and Uchiha, who had merged with the wall, thought that Haruno really did seem to have problems with guys. What does this have to do with me, Sakura-chan? Uzumaki asked. This is someone who definitely had no problems with male attention. Who else would have been smart enough to pull off such a joke? Naruto blinked a few times, looking at the medic, then leaned to the side, still clutching her head, and looked at the last of the clan, not even asking if it was her. Sasuke closed her eyes in resignation, realizing she'd just been completely betrayed. When Uchiha opened them again a second later, Haruno had already turned around, her furrowed brow smoothed, and her gaze and posture had lost all belligerence. From a vulture, Sakura instantly transformed into a lamb. Hello, Sasuke, the medic greeted, shyly tucking a pink strand of hair behind her ear. Sasuke will explain everything to you. Uzumaki suddenly rose cheerfully from her seat. Right, Sasuke? Naruto's tone carried an almost overt threat of a good beating if the Uchiha didn't resolve everything here and now. I think I'll leave you. And without taking her eyes off Sasuke until the end, Uzumaki walked to the exit of the room and left it, closing the door tightly behind her. Orochimaru's protege sighed again, but finally acknowledged Naruto's point. Enough of this running around, and it was time to at least explain things to Sakura. Express her thoughts openly, which might cause hurt feelings, disappointment, and hostility, but at least it wouldn't further complicate things for either her or Haruno. And what did Naruto mean when she said you'd explain everything? The girl began, stealing glances at the Uchiha. She was obviously pleased to be alone with her. That it was I who used your appearance when I came to Saya yesterday, Sasuke answered bluntly. But why? Sakura asked meekly, slightly confused. The Uchiha thought Naruto hadn't been asked such questions. It was always like this. Their former teammate behaved as she was with Uzumaki, but only flirted with the last member of the clan. This had irritated Sasuke before, and it irritated him now too. Again, in a circle. It had to be that way, Uchiha replied, trying to encourage Haruno to react appropriately. Oh well, if it was necessary, Sakura answered. Sasuke pressed her lips into a thin line. No, this is completely out of line. Why won't you tell me anything? The Uchiha asked, her voice growing cold. You were just ready to tear Naruto apart, and you won't say a word to me? Haruno smiled innocently. Yes, because you wouldn't make stupid jokes on me. And how far are you going to let me go? The last of the clan suddenly became seriously angry at her former teammate. And Sakura, in response to her question, only looked away and blushed. Great demons! Sasuke couldn't help but exclaim, dreading to even think what Haruno might have imagined. He strode up to her in 3 long strides and grabbed her by the shoulders. Maybe he should just use his Sharingan and suggest something to her? Sakura, you're a grown, smart, beautiful girl. Just because you didn't have it with a few guys doesn't mean anything. Understand? The medic looked at Uchiha in confusion, but did not have time to answer. You've decided to pick off everyone from Team 7, I see? Ino's voice came from the doorway, not quite at the right time. Leaving Sasuke to explain himself to Sakura, Naruto finally went to lunch with a clear and untroubled conscience. However, afterward, a dire dilemma awaited her. She had to return to the tower archives, and Shikamaru and Kakashi could be there again. So, fully aware of the need to face this scaffold, Naruto took the longest possible approach. She decided to take a walk a couple of extra blocks to at least cut down on class time. She hadn't skipped classes this much since the academy. Those were great times, except for the fact that almost every girl in the class was chasing the Uchiha. And how could she not realize that Sasuke was a girl? Suddenly, a hand emerged from the gateway, grabbed the girl by the shoulder, and dragged her into a narrow passage between the buildings. A man's gloved hand clamped her mouth, and the fourth daughter found herself pinned to the wall by a strange body. A vaguely familiar outline flashed before her face, but her reflexes were quicker. Punching her attacker in the kneecap, Uzumaki slipped out of his grasp, grabbed the hand clamping her mouth by the wrist, and tried to twist it away, but she didn't have time. Both her arms were grabbed and pinned back against the wall. "It's okay, Naruto. It's me." At that moment, the future Hokage finally saw before her. "Kakashi-sensei?" Luck was clearly not on her side today. Part 5 Fifths Sasuke had always thought it was terrifying to offend her, although she couldn't imagine what would have to happen to cause her to feel hurt. But when Ino, like a mother protecting her child from danger, flew up to him and Haruno and pushed the Uchiha away from Sakura, the latter of the clan realized just how dangerous a woman's resentment could be. Just how merciless it was, that was yet to be discovered. "And how long have you been turning Team 7 into a lesbian club?" Yamanaka glared at Sasuke. "What?" Uchiha even asked out of politeness. "Sakura, don't go near her," Ino said insistently, giving Haruno a warning look, and then turned her attention back to Sasuke. "Does Sixth even know?" "Know what?" Sakura asked, clearly not understanding what was going on. 5 minutes ago, I saw her hitting on Naruto," Yamanaka said in a well-behaved man's tone. "I was so surprised I couldn't even say a word at first. And now that I've come back to finally express my opinion, she's already hitting on you. Then maybe you could tell me how you tried to seduce me yesterday?" Uchiha had already been getting angry since her conversation with Haruno, and Ino was only adding fuel to the fire. "And several times before that. Or do you bring aphrodisiac candles to everyone's house?" Yamanaka pursed her lips, but then Sakura suddenly joined the conversation. "So you were talking about Sasuke when you said you decided to try something new?" Haruno looked at her friend in surprise. "Who were you thinking of?" Ino responded in surprise. "But that's not fair, Ino," Sakura pouted, ignoring her friend's question. "You always knew about my feelings for Sasuke." "Sakura, how many times have I told you? Don't confuse love with admiration," Yamanaka said in the tone of an academy teacher. "Although who am I telling you that to? You've never even had a proper crush before, because you ended up on a team made up entirely of girls who at first all seemed like guys." "But you too," Haruno began. Ino paused proudly. "I'm just self-educating, without caring what others think," Sasuke added coldly. Yamanaka lifted her nose proudly. "You only think about yourself." "Ino," Sakura intervened before the Uchiha could make any more caustic remarks. "Sasuke doesn't just think about himself. Who else, for example?" Yamanaka feigned surprise. "Yes, a lot about whom?" Orochimaru's protege wanted to get a word in again, but she was once again beaten to it. "And besides Naruto?" "I can't say for sure, because Sasuke was absent from the village for almost 3 years. "That's enough," the Uchiha snapped. "I didn't mean to say it like that, but you're leaving me no choice. Ino, I'm not going to conduct any experiments, training sessions, or warm-ups with you. I'm flattered by your initiative, but no thank you. Please understand this, please." She turned to Haruno. "Sakura, I don't accept your feelings. You're close to me, we've been through a lot on the same team, I treat you like a little sister, and that's why I won't accept your confession. There are no signs of this, I didn't return to the village because of you, and you really just haven't met the right guy yet. And for both of you, if you haven't figured it out yet," Sasuke raised her open palms, "I'm not going to start any relationships with any girls, because I still have to rebuild the clan." Having spoken her mind, Uchiha suddenly felt visibly better. Now, standing up straight, she could look at her friends freely. Why had she kept everything to herself before? Well, what did I tell you? She only thinks about herself, Yamanaka said authoritatively after a short pause, turning to Haruno. Ah, that's why. All of Sasuke's optimism and confidence vanished as if by the wind. And is it true that? Sakura said, disappointed and offended at the same time, slumping her shoulders. And now it was possible to climb the walls without any chakra. So, it was for you three that Naruto asked for advice? A new voice suddenly sounded in the room. All three girls almost jumped up and turned around to stare at Shikamaru leaning against the doorframe. Oh, hi! Yamanaka was the first to respond, though it took her a while, smiling nervously. Have you been here long? A couple of minutes ago, the guy replied. By the way, have you seen Naruto herself? He asked with a completely calm expression. Nara's appearance was like the arrival of a savior angel for Sasuke. She almost felt ashamed for having interfered with him and Uzumaki so many times. Didn't she go back to class? She said, clutching at straws. No, Shikamaru answered. She's probably gone to lunch. The Uchiha hurried. Come on, I know a couple of places she might be. The last of the clan appeared next to Nara, grabbed his arm, and quickly pulled him away from the break room with the two extremely offended individuals. I wish she would listen to Naruto at least once more. Hataki released her hands, and the girl nearly slid down the wall, but managed to stay on her feet. The copy ninja, with his back pressed against the opposite wall, peered intently at the flow of people on the busy street from which he had just plucked Uzumaki. Weren't you followed? Sixth asked, his voice laced with undisguised concern. And no, Naruto managed to find the strength to reply, and suddenly thought that it was unlikely the Hokage would simply hide in an alley. Kakashi-sensei, did something happen? She asked worriedly. What else, if not a threat to the village, could have caused such behavior from its leader? Yes, he replied, and Uzumaki prepared for an introductory briefing on the enemy's level of danger, but all she heard was, the ambassadors from the mist arrived a day early. And? Naruto was surprised by her unexpected answer. And with them, Mizuki Tsurumi Mei. The copyist stopped monitoring the gap between the houses and looked at his former student. What's wrong with Mei? Uzumaki still didn't understand. Let's put it this way, Kakashi thought for a second. She wants more than just formal communication with me. The forced daughter raised her neat eyebrows. What he means is that. Oh, Naruto. The sixth sighed and, placing one hand on the girl's head, ruffled her hair. If only everyone could be as innocent as you. Uzumaki felt her eyes sting again. Of course, she understood what he was talking about. And that only made it worse, because a gorgeous woman like Tsurumi Mei suited Hataki much better than his former student with her crush. Besides, that gesture of his. Naruto, her sensei called again, and his hand stopped. Did something happen? Now she would definitely either burst into tears or melt from his tone in principle. One did not interfere with the other too much. No, Uzumaki lied, and suddenly looked Kakashi in the eyes without any difficulty. The Hokage chuckled, his hand sliding under the girl's head. His thumb slowly ran across her cheek. You're becoming more and more like your father, Six said with a particularly profound tone. But I can tell when you're not telling the whole story. A painful ache gripped her chest, and Naruto thought it was now or never. Mustering her resolve, she pushed off the wall and took a step forward. In an honest search for the forced daughter, Sasuke took Shikamaru to the places where they usually dined. She urgently needed to make up for the decision Uzumaki had pushed her into. Now let her deal with the Nara herself. The Uchiha was no longer her help. Not at all. In the end, they went around 3 establishments, and in the 4th, they finally received a positive answer, saying that yes, the future Hokage was here, but left about 15 minutes ago. I think if she'd gone straight to the tower, we would have crossed paths, Shikamaru suggested, and Orochimaru's protege silently thanked the benevolent gods for Naruto's shirking. If she'd gone straight to the archives, Sasuke would probably have been torn to pieces by now by the tender, carrying hands of Haruno and Yamanaka. She could have gone back in a big circle, Uchiha suggested. There's one way. Sasuke walked forward along one of Uzumaki's favorite routes. By the way, I wanted to ask you something, the guy said after they'd walked a few blocks. Could you please not come pick up Naruto tomorrow? Why would that be? Uchiha asked in response. She had already recovered somewhat from her recent showdown with the two kunoichi and, as a result, from her permissive gratitude to the boy. I want to get closer to her, Nara answered bluntly. At one point, I thought you had plans for Naruto, but you yourself said you still had to rebuild the clan. He returned Sasuke's words. The last of the clan liked honesty, but did not like it when people began to move her from her favorite place. As far as I know, Kakashi wanted to occupy Naruto with ambassadors from the mist tomorrow, the Uchiha said, not without a hidden jab. That's my concern, Shikamaru assured her. At least we'll be even for today. Now that was just too much impudence. Sasuke even stopped. In that case, you should definitely start by convincing Kakashi, she said, almost no longer hiding the double meaning. Why him? The guy asked, clearly eager to extract new information from any kind of answer. I don't even know. Uchiha began to look around, as if lost in thought. Maybe because he's also not indifferent to. Then her gaze accidentally caught on a familiar red-haired bike in the alleyway. It was definitely Naruto. There was no doubt about it. And there was a hand on her head. Sasuke's eyebrows rose involuntarily as Hitaki lowered his hand and ran his thumb over the future Hokage's cheekbone. She thought he was as caring as a father. Apparently noticing Sasuke's strange facial expression, Nara turned and followed her gaze. And the moment Uzumaki took a step toward the sensei, they both took off. Naruto rarely made carefully considered decisions, trusting more to her inner impulse, her intuition, that benefactor she didn't even fully recognize. It usually worked, but she never knew whether her wish was right this time, because before she could complete her step, Sasuke and Shikamaru were already in the alley next to her and Hitaki, both looking almost frightened. Uzumaki was surprised for a moment, then frowned sharply, meeting the Uchiha's gaze. Naruto! The last of the clan looked at her questioningly, not without a hint of subtext. But the forced daughter ignored this subtext. Sasuke, don't tell me that you're again, she began angrily. No, I really did sort everything out, the Uchiha interrupted hastily. And you, are everything all right? She glanced alternately at the 6th and the future 7th. Yes, what happened? Kakashi answered for Uzumaki. He had already removed his hand, of course. I thought you were in the tower with the Mist Ambassadors. Shikamaru joined the conversation, not taking his eyes off the copy ninja. Sorry, I was already on my way to class, it's just... Naruto tried to apologize to Nara, but suddenly realized that any excuses now would sound extremely stupid. It was I who detained her. Hitaki came to the rescue and added, I want to take her with me to meet the ambassadors. Uzumaki swallowed the lump that had risen in her throat again. We took up an important topic this morning. I'd like to finish it, Shikamaru noted casually. As far as I remember, Naruto was always stronger in practice. The 6th answered quite good-naturedly. However, she also needs the theory of diplomacy, Nara continued. Well, we don't want to shock our guests with her academic preparation, Kakashi said, still leaving room for a joke. It'll all be clearer in practice. But he, too, was already looking only at Shikamaru. Then I'll go with you, he said. You'll probably be extremely busy. The future Hokage thought that she didn't want to be present when this conversation ended. Young man, I don't think it's up to you to decide. The copyist's voice carried a metallic note that was familiar to both Uchiha and Uzumaki. Sasuke glanced back and forth between Nara and Hitaki, as if watching the movement of a ball they were tossing back and forth. Nevertheless, The Uchiha was acutely aware of the tension building in the cramped space between the buildings, clearly too small for 4 people at once. By the way, meeting the gaze of the forced daughter, Sasuke realized that she had never seen Uzumaki so confused before. Uchiha raised her eyebrows and lowered her head slightly. "I told you so." Naruto sighed and held out her hand, palm up. This movement caught the attention of both Kakashi and Shikamaru. "Excuse me, but it seems we have urgent business to attend to," Sasuke said with the utmost politeness, placing her hand in her friend's. "Why is she so kind? Meet me tomorrow at the official reception." Uzumaki, apparently having already gathered chakra in her legs, pushed off the ground and, using wall jumps, soared upward, dragging Orochimaru's protege along with her. Once on the roof, Naruto, still holding her hand, dashed toward the Hokage tower. "Where are we going?" was all Uchiha asked. "To the post office at headquarters," Naruto replied. "We need to send an urgent falcon to Gaara." The next day, the friends dutifully attended the official reception in honor of the embassy from the mist. They were close to each other, regularly changing their conversation partners and occasionally moving around the room, as everyone was present, including Sakura and Ino. "I wonder how it all ended yesterday," Uchiha asked rhetorically when she and Naruto were alone for a few minutes. "I don't even want to think about it," Uzumaki answered, watching Mei and Kakashi's conversation. The Mizukage was subtly flirting, and Ataki studiously kept at least an elbow's distance. When Terumi occasionally took a step forward, the copy ninja immediately took a similar step back, maintaining a politely interested appearance and having no legal recourse to escape the conversation. "Just don't tell me that you," Sasuke began, following the direction of her friend's gaze. "Come on!" The forced daughter tugged the Uchiha by the sleeve toward the two Kage. "Hello, Mei," she greeted cheerfully. "How are you? Remember Sasuke?" Naruto dragged the last of the clan over and placed her between herself and Kakashi. The corner of Uchiha's mouth twitched nervously. She remembered very well how, at the first meeting of the 5 Kage, she and Terumi had tried to kill each other. After lunch, closed-door negotiations took place, attended by the Hokage, Shikamaru, Naruto, and Sasuke representing Konoha. The latter naturally slipped into the audience and stood behind Uzumaki's chair, while Nara logically took the seat behind Hitaki. Oddly enough, the forced daughter had had ample time to prepare for this meeting, and the Uchiha's presence allowed her to better concentrate on the matter at hand. Therefore, the negotiations on the previously contentious issue of the islands bordering the water and fire countries were fruitful, and even almost in Konoha's favor. Having signed the final seal, Naruto stretched shamelessly in her chair, leaning back. Sasuke's hand fell on her shoulder, indicating she'd accomplished everything. A quick glance at Shikamaru and Kakashi only confirmed it. "I see you're quite close," Mei remarked, hinting at the Uchiha's hand. "It depends on how possible it is," Uzumaki answered diplomatically evasively, touching the fingers of Orochimaru's protege with her fingertips. The next day, after lunch and the ambassador's departure, the Mizukage had been reluctant to say goodbye to the copy sage for a long time, constantly trying to get a long-term invitation to visit. A letter arrived from Gaara, consisting of a short note and a scroll with an official request invitation. "Excellent," Naruto breathed out after reading Sabaku's message. "All that's left is for Sensei to sign it. Is your leave slip ready? We just need to go to headquarters," Sasuke answered. Even before the official reception, she, not being a fool, stopped by the management to warn them of a possible indefinite leave of mission and asked them to prepare all the necessary documents as quickly as possible. She asked as much as a representative of the Uchiha clan could ask. "Then should we split up?" Uzumaki suggested. After yesterday's success, she felt significantly more confident, according to Sasuke. "I'll wait for you at the Hokage's." Agreed. The long-awaited freedom was just a few steps away, and God forbid anyone should stand in the way of Orochimaru's protege now. While waiting for her papers in the headquarters reception area, she encountered Kiba and his eternal furry companion. "Aw, Uchiha," Inuzuka drawled, somewhat casually. "Running away again?" They'd never really gotten along, and, frankly, Sasuke genuinely couldn't understand why Kiba had any complaints against her. She'd gotten into trouble a couple of times during classes back in the academy, but who hasn't? "They offered me a spot as your replacement as a tracker for the remaining apostates after the war," the boy continued, not waiting for a response from the silent Uchiha. "They said you were just doing paperwork, but we'll catch them all, right, Akamaru?" The large white dog barked loudly and cheerfully, confirming his master's words. Sasuke winced. She'd never liked loud noises. Although, overall, she wasn't surprised by the chief of staff's choice. Finding the rogues would have been impossible without all the work the Uchiha had done. So Inuzuka was only needed to capture them. Sasuke wondered if he should know this, but at that moment, someone finally brought her a scroll with a signed release. "What, you still haven't said anything?" Kiba asked brazenly as the girl headed for the exit. "No wonder you didn't stay here long." The Uchiha stopped. No, she didn't fall for such obvious bait, but she had a more interesting idea. "You know," Sasuke turned to the boy and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm so unreliable. I completely forgot I promised Ino I'd train. And since you're the one who supports everything I've left behind, could you spare a little time for her?" Inuzuka quite logically suspected some kind of trick, so he didn't rush into trouble right away. "From what I've heard, your training is quite unconventional," Uchiha added, "and Ino is currently looking for experiments." This was said with such a stony face that even the aforementioned Yamanaka would not have suspected a double meaning in Sasuke's words. "Okay then," Kiba muttered reluctantly. "That's great," the girl said and left the reception area. "An urgent summons from the Kazekage?" Kakashi asked. "For an indefinite period?" "Yeah." Uzumaki nodded, standing close to the Hokage's chair. After seeing the embassy off, the copy ninja looked tired and, it seemed to her, almost absent-minded, and Naruto understood perfectly well what had caused this state. Nevertheless, it was one of the most opportune moments for the Six to sign official documents with almost no questions asked. "And if you're worried about that mission to the stone?" Kakashi looked up at her questioningly. "I'm quite skilled in diplomacy, so Shikamaru can handle it alone, I'm sure." Uzumaki calmly withstood the Hokage's direct gaze. Gaara confirmed that he had just planned to send Temari to the stone. "Yes, you showed your best yesterday," the Six confirmed, glancing over the Kazekage's scroll again. "Okay, apparently you need this even more than Gaara does. So I'll let you keep quiet about the situation itself, but don't tell me nothing happened." Naruto looked down at Hataki's profile and thought that it seemed like after everything that had happened, her crush on her sensei was starting to let go of her. "Actually, there is something I have been wanting to tell you for a long time." The copyist reached for the seal, but Uzumaki knew he was listening to her carefully, so she leaned over and quietly said, "Thank you." And when the seal fell on the parchment, the fourth's daughter, holding one tail of hair so that it would not get in the way, touched the stranger's cheekbone with her lips right through the fabric of the mask, as if also leaving her mark. And why wasn't she surprised that at that very moment the door to the village head's office suddenly turned out to be open? Already weaving through the corridors of the Hokage Tower, Sasuke felt an almost joyful excitement at the prospect of a vacation in the form of a mission. Now she was even ready to meet both Ino and Sakura again. After all, Uzumaki would surely want to say goodbye to the latter, so fate could very well throw the Snake Sannin's protege a chance encounter with Yamanaka. And of course it did. Ino was walking with Shikamaru, both carrying papers, and they collided with the Uchiha at an intersection. Having paid her respects to fate, Sasuke wanted to turn around and continue on, but her childhood friend stepped forward, as if blocking her path. "I'm going to see the Hokage," Uchiha clarified. "We too," Shikamaru replied. "The three of us had to squeeze into the hallway." Nara walked in the center, between the girls. Perhaps by accident, or perhaps deliberately. "Reports on the meeting?" Sasuke asked. She was in too good a mood to even be conversational. "Yes," the guy confirmed. "From the analytics department and the sensors department." Out of the corner of his eye, Uchiha thought he saw Ino slightly raise her neat nose. "What about you?" Shikamaru asked. "So, some papers from headquarters," Sasuke said evasively. "It looks like a scroll with a leave of absence," Nara remarked casually. "He is." The last of the clan did not lie. "So you're leaving somewhere?" "There is such a thing." Shikamaru wanted to say something else, but Yamanaka interrupted him. "Are you running away from the village again? Does Naruto even know?" Uchiha understood why Ino was being so sarcastic and decided not to make the situation worse by keeping silent. "You can't even say anything," the censor concluded in an extremely feminine manner, but Sasuke still decided to continue the policy of playing the silent game, especially since they had already stopped in front of the Hokage's office. Shikamaru, as the center, grabbed the handle and pulled the door toward him. What was happening inside was literally revealed primarily to him and the Uchiha, and what Sasuke saw gave her a feeling of déjà vu. Only this time, Naruto was leaning over him, kissing him not on the lips, but on his cheekbone. Feeling the hair on the back of her neck suddenly stand up, Orochimaru's protege quickly realized what Yamanaka absolutely must not see. "You know, Ino, I wanted to tell you." Sasuke turned sharply to the girl and looked her straight in the eye, almost waving her hand to get her attention. "I wanted to tell you." She needed to think of something urgently. "Hurry." "We could have made it work if you were a guy." It would probably be better if she waved her hand. Or two. Ino almost choked with indignation. "Shikamaru, will you give my papers to the Hokage?" The Uchiha carefully placed her scroll on top of the folder in the boy's hands, seeing Naruto hurrying toward them. "Let's talk later." The fourth daughter's words were also addressed to the speechless Nara, because, slipping past him, Uzumaki grabbed Sasuke's hand and pulled him along the corridor. "Bye." "Bye, Ino." Uchiha also said goodbye for some reason, turning around to follow her friend. "No, did you hear that?" Yamanaka's indignant tone reached her, but Sasuke wasn't sure Shikamaru would be able to answer her right now. Saya was waiting for Sakura at the hospital exit. They hadn't arranged to meet, but Haruno had recently noticed the ANBU artist's obvious interest in her. "Why couldn't you have just not warned me?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. Sakura was very tired from her shift, trying not to think about Sasuke's words, Ino's actions, and everything that had happened over the past week. "Because then you wouldn't even think that I was watching you," Saya said in her usual style, smiling falsely. "Why are you doing this?" Sakura asked, just to ask. "Because I'm studying you." "Why study me?" Haruno sensed this conversation was about to, if not already, go in circles, but the one who had broken so many other circles prevented that from happening. "Hello, Sakura-chan, Saya!" Naruto jumped down from the roof towards them, and the Uchiha landed like a shadow behind her. "Hello," the medic greeted, trying not to look at the last of the clan. Uzumaki, wearing a white cloak with red flames along the hem, and with a disproportionately large scroll on her back, flew up and took Haruno by the hands. "Sasuke and I are leaving the village for a while," she said, looking Sakura in the eyes. "Take care. Take care," the Uchiha, who was also nearby, echoed, raising her hand and touching Haruno's shoulder just above the elbow with her fingertips. "Oh, okay," Sakura replied, looking between her former teammates in surprise and noticing in Sasuke's gaze, not an apology, but a hope that she would understand her. The girl suddenly felt catastrophically embarrassed by all her stupid declarations of love and the wild half-flirtations she'd proven incapable of. So what if it didn't work out with a couple of guys? So why switch to her friends right away? "We'll leave her to you." Releasing Haruno's hands, Naruto saluted Saya and prepared to jump back onto the roof. We'll settle the score later, Uchiha added for some reason, and followed the future Hokage. The first heroines of the war dissolved into thin air like a blurry shadow, and Sakura felt, as always, a little sad that she still sometimes couldn't keep up with them. Well, now we're left alone. Drawing attention to herself, Saya took Haruno by the wrist and threw her hand over her head, simultaneously pulling her by the waist and tilting her towards herself. Sakura almost shuddered. "What are you doing?" she asked, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "Nothing at all," the girl answered with her unchanging porcelain smile, letting go of Haruno. "It's a shame I couldn't just have a normal conversation with Shikamaru," Naruto complained as he and the Uchiha galloped across the rooftops towards the village gates. "Rest assured, he finally realized that he has no chance," Sasuke assured her. "I hope he'll be okay," the future Hokage said, completing her final leap right on the gate line. The Uchiha landed next to her. The setting sun was shining in my eyes, a deep orange, slowly sinking into the finely trembling sea of foliage that surrounded Konoha on all sides. "Well, should we at least stop by Gaara's for the sake of decency?" Naruto asked rhetorically. "Are we in a hurry?" Sasuke answered her question with a matching question, glancing at her friend before jumping up. The fourth daughter chuckled and followed her. /May August 2015/